What is up, everyone? I'm CBMF Productions. Film has been part of our modern culture for over a century at this point, growing from audiences fainting at the sights of characters like Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu, to blowing audiences away with modern blockbuster franchises like the MCU. Film has been one of the mainstays in the entertainment world that has its own industry and various circles that center around many genres and time periods. And today, I'm going to rank my favorite 100 films that I've seen over the course of my 19 years of being on this earth. Before we start, I do want to put a couple of caveats in here so people don't shout at me in the comments section. This is an entirely subjective video, which I figured you've already kind of gotten for looking at the title and clicking on the video. But as we all know, we do see people that get butthurt that their opinions doesn't line up exactly like theirs. And to those people, we all have different perspectives on each movie, and none of us walk away from watching a movie in the exact same way. That's just not how people work. So instead of getting mad, just list your favorite 100 films down in the comments if you feel so inclined to. And the same goes for everyone else in the comments section. Secondly, this will contradict some of my earlier rankings of previous franchises that I've done in the past. And I just want to say this here right now, that this list is not just based on movies I like more than one another. This list is way more complex than that, and more or less, this list is about what films that truly cement me as a person, and what films really shaped me into the movie fan that I am today. And lastly, this kind of goes in hand with the first caveat that I noted, but there are going to be quite a handful of huge films that aren't on this list. Many films got cut from this list and narrowed it down to 100, so if you're wondering where a certain film or a franchise is on this list, just ask me down in the comments. But do remember this is my personal list. This is not the objective list of the best films of all time like top 100 on IMDb or something like that. But anyways, strap in, get some snacks, because this is going to be one hell of a ride. Let's not waste any more time and get into my top 100 films of all time. Number 100.
I mean, you're insane. Why would you even want this? Yes, I loved you, and then all we did was resent each other and try to control each other and cause each other pain.
That's marriage.
Gone Girl is something an effective tale about a woman's scorn. David Fincher directs this film with such an egregious and raw mindset, and it works perfectly for the film's atmosphere. The acting is absolutely superb, especially from the main two performances in Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike, and even Tyler Perry's great in this movie. The score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, again another fantastic collaboration between these two and David Fincher, and they just do a flawless job. And the way the film twists the narrative and always just keeps you on the edge of your seat allows it to not become predictable. Granted, I've never read the book, but you can tell that there's a lot of creative effort put into the screenplay, making it different from what was put beforehand, from what I've been told. The film is fast-paced, has some very genuinely creepy moments that aren't necessarily meant to scare you or be over the top, but the way that the film maturingly, just protrudes into your mind and just shows the dark side of humanity and just how, people can manipulate each other to the worst possible degree. This was actually one of the few films I was actually not allowed to watch until I was older in high school, which was kind of a rare thing for me because after I entered middle school, my parents kind of gave me carte blanche to watch anything I wanted, with the exception of a couple movies, and this was one of them, and I completely understand why. This movie's not necessarily, an extreme movie, apart from kind of the third act with Rosamund Pike and the handcuff sequence, if you know what I'm talking about, but just the way that the film is so mature, and the film's just so dark and demented in so many aspects, that I completely understand that if I watched it when I was younger, I just want to have gotten the impact of what this film truly means and what the film's truly about. It's a fantastic movie, and if you have not seen it yet, please check it out because it's one of David Fincher's best films ever. Number 99.
Are you referring to the background score?
Yes!
You've heard Beethoven before?
Yes! So you're keen on music? Yes!
A Clockwork Orange is still one of my favorite Kubrick films to this day. It's a fantastic story showing the desensitization of a criminal basically kind of being reprogrammed as becoming a productive member of society, and the way that we see this transition throughout the film is flawlessly executed by the way Malcolm McDowell portrays the main character, which is still a special performance to this day, and it makes me sad that now he's just doing stuff like Home Alone 5 and Lunchables commercials. Stanley Kubrick's direction, what can you say about the guy that hasn't already been said about him? The way he handles on shots is just so meticulously, the way he edits the films are just so perfectly paced, the way he's able to handle on, certain scenes, like whenever the infamous rape scene we get in the movie of the home invasion is just, it's creepy in a way that you don't really experience in many other movies. When most directors would very much head on the gore side of things and go on the shock value side of things, which I get this was very extreme for the time being, but the way that the film handles it in such an artistic way makes it have way more merit than if it was like a Saw movie or like I Spit in Your Grave or something like that. The score is brilliant, the pacing's incredible, the film is haunting in a lot of aspects, and the way that the film portrays the messages by the very end makes it stick with you, and it's still a film that really just creeps me out to the bone. Number 98.
Eat my shorts.
What was that?
Eat my shorts.
You just bought yourself another Saturday, mister.
Crushed.
The Breakfast Club is one of the simplest films that John Hughes has ever made, but one of the most effective ones by far. It takes the best aspects of John Hughes and just ramps up to 11. The characters are all very complex in ways that you don't expect from the initial premise of these 5 kids from all different sides of the high school tracks being stuck in detention for a Saturday afternoon. And the way that the film just portrays these characters and just peeling back the layers in each and every single one of them, and you realize who they actually are. And the way that the film just handles the pacing, the film's a great balance of tone and pace, of being able to be really fun at moments, but also it's very tear-jerking in a lot of moments as well. The performances are all handled excellently from Emilio Estevez, Molly Ringwald, Judd Hirsch, Anthony Michael Hall. They're all fantastic in this movie. You get the villains in here like the main principal, who are just classic villains. The soundtrack is, of course, iconic. The ending's, of course, great. The film is just a great balance of pace and tone and direction and writing. The dialogue is fantastic. This is just a great teen movie that, even nearly 40 years later, the film is still ages like fine wine. And this is a film that I'm so glad never got a sequel. I know John Hughes' original plan was going to kind of make a sequel every single decade, kind of like what Richard Linklater would do with the Before trilogy. And I'm glad that we never got that, mainly because this is a film that works best as a standalone movie. And the fact that we never got to find out what happened to these kids next Monday after this event happened over the course of the movie makes the film just have way more relevance to it. It makes the film feel more realistic in the way that you come across various people in your life that you might only see once and never see again, but they'll still have an impact on you. And that's how the film really impacts this audience, in my opinion. It's a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it yet, please check it out because it's a great teen movie and just a great film in general. Number 97.
팀장님?
Train to Busan is the first foreign film we'll talk about on this list of many, and it's a film that still really struck me with how much it surprised me. Watching this before the sequel came out last year, which isn't really a sequel by the way, that's a tangent, but watching this before the sequel came out last year on Netflix, I didn't really expect a whole lot from it. I heard good things about it, I heard it was a really good zombie movie, but man, this is such an emotional roller coaster ride of a movie. The way the film sets up its world and its characters are so well done, to where when characters start getting picked off throughout the course of the movie, you genuinely feel sad as if you know these people in real life. The choreography from all the zombies is just flawlessly well done because it's all practically done, which is one of the reasons why the sequel is just so disappointing, because they use CGI when they actually use performers to do all these different ways of zombies, and the way they articulate their body moves are so unnatural, but it's just so cool to see on screen. The containment and claustrophobia being stuck on a train throughout most of the runtime is just so well done, in where it makes everything feel isolated and contained, and where everything's high octane and you don't really feel safe watching the movie. There's no moment to where you can just sit and relax and play on your phone while the film's going on. The directing is fantastic, the writing is also great at making you care about these characters, and each of them, especially the main character of this dad with his estranged daughter, having a great arc throughout most of the runtime. The cinematography is great, the action is fantastic, the gore is great. It gives you what you want from a zombie movie, but also gives you a lot more beyond that, and that's what makes this film in my top 100, because this film is just so much more emotional than I expected. And if you have not seen it yet, please check it out because this is a fantastic movie. Number 96.
Look into my eyes so you know what it's like. Look into my eyes so you know what it's like. Look into my eyes so you know what it's like to live a life not knowing what a normal life's like.
Short Term 12 is a directorial debut from Daniel Destin Cretton, who's a pretty big name nowadays just because he just came out with Shang-Chi at the time of recording a week and a half ago, and that has done huge numbers. But before he joined Marvel or did stuff like Just Mercy or The Glass Castle, he did a small little movie about this halfway house, and it's just really effective in my opinion. This is one of those indie movies that the way that the film is so small scale and the way the film story is told so personally, it feels so realistic in the way that it just affects you to the bone. The performances are fantastic as well. Brie Larson, you can give her shit for Captain Marvel and all that stuff, but she's a great actress outside of that, and I think this is still her best performance to this day. even outside of Room, which got her the Oscar. John Gallagher Jr. in this movie, also very underrated actor. I think he's fantastic in anything he's done, and is no exception. You get early performance from Lakeith Stanfield before he really blew up with stuff like, Judas and the Black Messiah and Get Out, which we'll talk about later. He's great in a minor role here. Just all the performances in this film are fantastic. It's just all the performances in this film are fantastic. The cinematography is great. The soundtrack is also very mellow and very acoustic, but I think it works for the film's tone. The lighting's great. The set design is also fantastic. The dialogue is just amazing, and the way that the film just portrays these different human relationships is just so rawly handled by Daniel Destin Cretton, and the way that he's just able to translate this human emotion to the screen, I just think it's done very, very well. It's a film that if you have not seen it, please check out, because definitely this is one of the more underseen films that I would definitely say out of this entire list, and just, especially after Shang-Chi, I think this director needs his previous work more looked at, and this is definitely his best work in my opinion. Number 95.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Jaws, the film that basically essentially created the modern day blockbuster. And it's a film that's still extremely effective and extremely holds up well damn near 50 years later. Spielberg, although I can definitely say he's kind of overhyped as a director, especially nowadays, since he really, for me, hasn't done a great film in the last 20-25 years of his career, this is still one of the best thrillers I've seen in my entire life. It's a simple story about these three men just trying to hunt down this shark that's attacking their local island. But the way that Spielberg directs this film that could have just been a cheesy 70s B-movie into just one of the most classic films you will ever watch, it's just expertly handled for a guy that at the time, this was only his second movie, or third film I believe, yeah, only his third film, and he's just able to have some of those iconic lines in film history. The speech that Quint gives is iconic, and the way there are three men in Quint, Hooper, and Brody are all able to come together and definitely clash out the course of the runtime, but are able to beat the shark by the end. It's handled expertly well by Spielberg and the actors themselves. The dialogue is fantastic, some of the best lines you'll ever hear in a movie. The cinematography is great, the score by John Williams, I mean, come on, classic stuff right there. The way that the film, of course, iconically, the shark broke down most of the time, the mechanical sharks, so they had to use different camera angles and basically most of the time shoot from POV style, which makes the film more effective and more scary as a result than any of the other sequels that we got that showed the shark all the time. And that also allows the film to also have an undercurrent of different tones and messages and themes in there that makes it have more weight to it than just if it was just a simple shark movie. The film is able to be entertaining, exciting, thrilling, but also very emotional at the same time. There's just so many great moments that make you explore in the characters. The dialogue is fantastic, the score is fantastic. Just everything about this film is just flawlessly done, and it's still one of the best films that Spielberg has ever done. Number 94. A History of Violence is the first comic book film that I'll be talking about on this list that many of you might not even know there's a comic book movie. This is a fantastic film by David Cronenberg, and an era where he went away from horror films and did more western stuff like this and Easter Promises and stuff like that. Which sounds kind of weird on paper, but just the way he directs this movie is so well done to where he does something wildly different from his career that he's done up until this point, but also is able to have moments of gore and stuff like that that remind you of stuff like Videodrome and The Fly and Scanners. The main performances in here from Tom Stahl, played by Viggo Mortensen, and his wife played by Maria Bello, William Hurt, Ed Harris is the main guy coming after him, and the way the film unravels a story about this small town diner owner who basically gets unraveled into this crime story that for the most of the runtime, you don't really, know what his role is. Most of the time that they say his name's Joey when he's not. To most of us, you don't realize who he actually is. And because Viggo Mortensen does such a great subdued performance where he's able to convince you that he's not this bad guy, and the way that the film unravels his story and is able to be minimalistic, but in a way that is so effective, and the fact that we don't see a whole lot from his backstory or the villain's perspective makes the film have a lot more weight to it, a lot more intrigue, to where it's best to leave things unsolved. Although the rest of the cast is also fantastic as well, minus the one bully that the son interacts with, I think is kind of corny. But I will say a standout is Maria Bello as Viggo Mortensen's wife. It's probably her best performance of her career thus far. And both the sex scenes they have in this film are two of the best sex scenes I've seen in any movie. They are just so rawly handled by Cronenberg in a way that's not like necessarily going for the thrills, but it just feels so realistic and so raw that it just puts a different emotion on the spin, and that's what this film does so well, is that it feels so different from everything else. This is not a comic book movie, this is not just a straightforward revenge movie, this is not just a simple thriller or, you know, a drama. This is a bunch of different things that just, the way that the film's written, the way the film's directed, and the way the film's edited and acted is so unique and something that I've never seen done anywhere else, in my opinion. It's a brilliant movie and still my favorite Cronenberg film by a landslide. Number 93.
왜 이렇게 약한 척해? 이제 시작인데. 기억해둬. 점점 끔찍해질 거야.
I Saw the Devil is a brutal movie. It's a movie that, once again, I heard a lot of good things about, so I kind of watched it on the fly like 6 months ago, and it was just so crazy. It is a fantastic revenge thriller that, kind of sort of talking about with Train to Busan, it's a movie that could have been very, very simple, but the way it's executed and directed and written, it's just so much more than that. This film is a lot more demented and a lot more emotional than you expect, and it's handled in the best way possible. The main actors that, you know, portray these two leads in this grieving widow that's going against a serial killer and basically not necessarily killing him but torturing him to the point where he wants to kill himself is such a unique spin on the revenge twist that you can't help but, you know, not stop watching until the credits have rolled. The choreography is fantastic as a perspective for a Korean movie. You know, they just know how to handle action so much more than American movies. Even though the film's primarily kind of horror and thriller related, the film still tends to be very exciting in a lot of different ways you don't see coming. The story is well done, the film constantly pulls out different twists, and each character, the main two leads, are able to pull one off one another to where it's not just a simple revenge thriller about this one guy going after another guy. It's each of these guys just trying to go at one another throughout the most of the runtime, and it's just so brutal and it's so demented in so many ways that it's just so entertaining to watch. There's just so many moments in this film that would just stick with me, from like the scene in the hospital where, like, you know, the main guy, our hero, technically is like choking out the serial killer when he's like, the nightmare's only just begun, and the scene where, like, you know, he breaks into the guy's house at the very end is just so intense. It's such a good movie. I want to rewatch it right now just talking about it, but it's a fantastic movie, and if you have not seen it yet, please check it out. Number 92. Hot Fuzz is the first of many Edgar Wright films you will see on this list, and it's by no means no exception. This film is hilarious in my opinion. This is the second film of the Cornetto trilogy, and in my opinion it is the best one. A lot of people will pick Shaun of the Dead, and although I think that's a very funny film as well, there's just something about Hot Fuzz I think is just so unique about it. I mean, Edgar Wright's already a very unique filmmaker as it is, as the best directors are, but I think the way that the film is just such as a version from Shaun of the Dead, but also does, you know, kind of call back to it in many ways, I think is very interesting. I think the main chemistry between Simon Pegg and Nick Frost basically makes this movie. They are hilarious together as always. The main villains are also very subtly put at throughout the entire movie, and then when you get to that third act reveal, I think it's very cleverly put together. The film's non-stop funny, it's non-stop entertaining. The writing's on point, the directing's on point, the editing's also very funny, especially that opening sequence showing the montage and upbringing of Simon Pegg's character. And the way the film is able to blend like cop movie and cult movie and horror movie and, you know, over-the-top action all into one huge bundle, I think is also very fun. Also, the film is just such a unique style comedy that I just think it's endlessly rewatchable, it's extremely entertaining, and it's a film that if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out because it's a great movie. Number 91.
Hallelujah! Holy shit! Where's the Tylenol?
National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation is one of the best Christmas films ever made. It is a must-watch around my household every single year, and it's for many reasons. For me, I think it's the best vacation movie by far. This is the first film I watched out of that series for a long time before I got into other movies, and for me, the other ones just don't have the magic that one has. Even the first Vacation movie, which I think is a great movie, but I don't know, there's something about Christmas Vacation that's just so magical. You get the great chemistry between Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo as the husband and wife of the Griswold family, as always. All the in-laws we get into here, and just all the different personalities that just kind of like clash amongst each other the entire runtime. The way the film has different styles of comedy, from slapstick to jovial to crude. All of it is just handled expertly well by the directing and the writing. The editing is also fantastic too. There's so many just iconic jokes, like the scene whenever, you know, you're at the store with the hot woman, then, you know, she's part of Clark's dreams and visions, and then, you know, you see him in the window. Just all that funny stuff, that iconic rant that he gets after he gets the jellyfishing card. Randy Quaid as Uncle Eddie, I think it's just hilarious. And here, I think it's the funniest he's ever been in a vacation movie, to be honest with you. The soundtrack's fantastic. The atmosphere is also great at being this very lighthearted Christmas film with a good message, but also is very raunchy and crude when it needs to be. I don't know, it's just a film that just warms my heart every single Christmas season, and is a must-watch around the household. Number 90. The Prestige, one of the very few forgotten Nolan movies in his career. I don't know, Christopher Nolan's a director that he's made so many gigantic blockbusters over the course of the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, Tenet recently, you know. He's just done so many fantastic movies that I feel like this one always just kind of gets underseen. And the people that have seen it for the most part just kind of like negate it almost, you know. And for me, it's one of those movies that I actually didn't watch for a long time. It's actually one of the few Nolan films, along with like Following and Insomnia, that I didn't watch until last year. I technically did watch it in my AVTF1 class freshman year, but I'm someone that doesn't like to watch movies in class just because they just kind of bore me, and also because you have to split them out and you got to write notes and stuff like that. So I just never paid attention to it on first watch, but rewatching it, pretty much watching it for the first time last year during quarantine, I fell in love with The Prestige. I think it's one of Nolan's best films. The story about these two magicians just going at each other throughout the entire runtime, kind of similar to what I was talking about with that I Saw the Devil, where these two guys are just destroying each other every single time. They're just going at each other and trying to destroy one another's lives, and just trying to get on one another and trying to find out, you know, how they can best the other one out, and like what's, you know, because both of them are great magicians, but one's great at doing like the trick and being like the great showman. And then you have Christian Bale's character, who's more or less like, he's great at making the tricks, but he's not necessarily a great performer. And both these two have their strengths and weaknesses, and that makes the film constantly entertaining, constantly unpredictable, because there's not really one scene to where you feel victorious for a character, because you always know there's going to be something, you know, outside that you know that's going to be pulled to drag you further into the plot that, you know, makes it way more complex than you realize. The score is great, the acting's fantastic from all the other actors as well. You got Scarlett Johansson, Rebecca Hall, Andy Serkis, David Bowie's even in here, he's fantastic, Michael Caine. You know, a lot of the Nolan regulars are in here and they're all fantastic. The production design is great for making this look like this 19th century, from the clothing, the buildings, just the set design, all of it's fantastic. The pacing's great, the twists are fantastic in my opinion, they make total sense within the film's context. What the film's going for, I think, is very strong and very unique from what a lot of other films do. It's dark, but in a way that it's just a lot more demented the more you think about it. It's just a great movie that I implore you, if you have seen it and don't really think much of it or don't remember it, I implore you to give it a second watch, because I think there's just so much more under the surface that many people just kind of like shoved under the rug because this came up between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. And it's just so much more than a simple magician movie. Number 89. Saving Private Ryan for me is truly the last great Spielberg film that he's directed for, you know, the past 20-25 years of his career. This was truly, for me, the last landmark film he's made in his career. This was a film that could have been so rudimentary and so derivative, especially since this guy's already done another World War II movie that decade prior in Schindler's List. But the way that Spielberg is able to handle a different side of the World War II aspect, I think, is really well handled. You know, the way the film is able to shoot war in such a raw, aesthetic way that I think only Spielberg could have directed this movie. You know, there's so many iconic scenes. Of course, the iconic Normandy sequence, whenever, you know, that basically is the opener to the film. You get, of course, the iconic scene towards the end, we probably saw in the video, where Tom Hanks shoots the tank. There's just so many aspects that I think makes the film worthwhile. That casting's fantastic from all of the different actors that portray the characters. Set design's great, the score's fantastic, the atmosphere is great, the intensity is just so raw and so powerful in a way that, you know, only Spielberg could have directed the movie. It's, you know, for a 2.5-hour movie, it's very well paced. The writing's fantastic, directing fantastic. The way the film handles its action is also very well done. It's just a great movie that, it's just one of those classic films that deserves to be a classic for a reason. It's a great war movie, one of my favorites of all time. In a very saturated genre, I think it's just very still a unique film that you can understand why it's so iconic 20-25 years later. Number 88. The original Black Christmas, directed by the amazing Bob Clark, that would go on to direct A Christmas Story, which is very ironic. But without that, one of the mainstay slasher films of the 70s, and one of the main inspirations for films like Halloween and Friday the 13th that kicked open the doors for the slasher genre that just doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion. It's an extremely underrated thriller and a slasher that is way creepier than I realized. You know, I watched this when I was younger, like 2-3 years back, and I didn't really think much of it, but on a recent rewatch last Christmas, I really dug this movie. I think it's incredibly atmospheric, really, really creepy. Like, this is one of the few horror films that generally got under my skin, especially the main villain in Billy. He's so atmospheric in a way that, like, what makes Michael Myers so atmospheric and creepy is that we don't really know a whole lot about this character. We very rarely see him in the film, especially unmasked. We really only see his eye in the runtime. And the way that the film handles the gore and the death scenes is very creepy. The sound design is also extremely unsettling. Like whenever you get the rock in the chair with the woman suffocated upstairs in the attic. The way that the film is directed, how like the kills are so close to the actor's face that it feels claustrophobic in and of itself in the film that's mostly set inside a house. The Christmas aesthetic of the film also adds to the creepy nature in it because the film plays so many Christmas carols and the lighting and the way the film looks and feels like a traditional Christmas film, but the way how dark it truly is just makes it feel just that more unsafe. Because it feels like similar to Halloween, taking place in the suburbs, it can happen to you in any single place at any single time. It feels realistic in that aspect. The acting is great, the way that the characters are interacted in the story and the way that they actually have arcs and they're actually fully developed is very interesting. And you get many iconic actors like Margot Kidder in this film that are, you know, kind of precursors to what they would do later on in their careers. And it just leaves you on a note to where you just can't help but just think about it, because it's a film that just merits a rewatch, merits discussions, and it's a film that should be given a lot more credit for really starting the slasher genre and giving inspiration for films like Halloween and Friday the 13th than it, you know, has kind of gotten so far. It's a fantastic movie. It's by far the best version of Black Christmas. Screw the other two remakes. This is the definitive Black Christmas film, and every single December, this is something a must-watch on my list. Number 87. Ridley Scott's Alien is a masterclass in sci-fi horror. This is, again, one of the mainstays of the sci-fi genre, one of the mainstays of the horror genre that is still, you know, kind of templated and still kind of given a homage even nearly, 40-45 years later. This is a brilliant movie, handled expertly well by the writing, directing, lighting, cinematography, acting. All aspects of this film are firing at all cylinders and create a iconic slasher villain in the Xenomorphs, create an iconic mainstay hero in Ripley. Even though she, kind of like Sarah Connor in The Terminator, she really didn't get boosted up until the sequel, which we'll talk about later on this list. But even in this film, she's still very likable, very interesting. A great main hero that you want to follow and want to see live to the very end. The way the film handles its death sequence is also very well, because you can tell the film didn't really have a whole lot of money behind it. And not in a bad way, but the way that the film, kind of like Halloween and Black Christmas I was just talking about, the way the film handles its kills is very atmospheric, and the way the film uses its shadows and lighting, especially the sequence when you get, like, you know, the cat involved, I think is very iconic. The way the film handles its corridors, the way the film, of course, the chest burst sequence, like the practical effects and the design by H.R. Geiger is just brilliant. You know, you wonder how someone can come up with those designs. The score is great by Jerry Goldsmith. The way the film handles isolation and just the atmosphere, just being stuck on a space station with nowhere to go, is just brilliantly handled. It's a simple story, but just elevated so well by all the talent involved that it's just a film that is still creepy and still atmospheric even all this time later. Number 86. Wreck. by far probably my favorite found footage horror film of all time. You know, I like Blair Witch, I like Paranormal Activity, but this is the film that truly got under my skin as in terms of horror, you know, because, you know, many found footage films, you know, in that huge jump we got in like the early to mid 2010s when every horror film kind of felt like a found footage knockoff of Paranormal Activity because that blew it out of the water. Rec truly captures what makes a found footage horror film work. The film feels so raw and realistic and gritty and intense in a way that the film doesn't really feel like a movie. It feels like you're actually watching real footage. It was kind of the goal of what a found footage film should be doing. You know, you don't feel like you're watching a bunch of tropes or cliches on screen. And the way that the film is just so expertly handled by these two directors who, you know, planted all this choreography, and the way the film handles every single shot to where it all feels seamless. You know what I'm saying? You know, the film just, similar to what I was talking about Alien and Black Christmas, the film handles isolation extremely well, being stuck in this apartment for the entire runtime. The film gives you enough about the main characters where they make them likable and you want to see them survive to the end. But, and again, all for the apartment residents and the police, everybody's handled so well to where even the stereotypical ones that kind of are negated for the body count, even they have moments to where they have levity and likability, like, you know, our main character, who's a TV reporter, is interviewing them for her, you know, late time special. The scares are genuinely creepy, the way, like, they have kind of like scene whenever, like, you see the old woman, who's kind of like the first zombie you see in the movie, running towards the cops, and the way, you know, you get that kind of scene towards the end when you see all the zombies running up the staircase. You know, just so many great shots in this film that are just expertly handled well by the directing and the writing. The film's so simply handled, and the way the film sticks with you. There's so many great shots, they're great characters. The film's just creepy in a way that very few found footage horror films actually manage to get. It's a fantastic movie that actually kicked off a pretty good franchise in my opinion. But for this singular experience, I think Rec is an amazing horror film. If you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. Number 85.
But it's really no more painful than a punch in the chest.
Why are you getting punched in the chest?
You're gonna be fine, baby doll.
Kick-Ass is one of many comic films that kind of jump-started when the comic genre was kind of on a high after the success of Iron Man and stuff like that, and is a way that is able to subvert from a lot of the other tropes of the comic genre, also paying homage to them in a very creative and effective way. And it's mainly him from the way that Matthew Vaughn directs the movie. He's a brilliant director who has done comic films his entire career up until this point. It's super stylistic, but also the way the film also handles its substance. It has great characters that you all care about. You get Dave Lazuski, played by the great Aaron Taylor Johnson, in his best role to date. You get Chloe Grace Moretz, you get Nicolas Cage, you get McLovin, Chris Plaza, you get Mark Strong. You get these great actors all portraying very complex and interesting characters, and they're all very stylistically portrayed, and the way the film's edited could have been very annoying, but the way the film feels like a comic book put to screen. The film handles its cliches expertly well, the action's fantastic, the gore is very well handled, there's just so much fun and flavor and just so much style that's put onto the screen that is just so much fun and entertaining. And the film's message about basically what it means to be a superhero and should you really do this, and the sacrifices and the risk of becoming a superhero, I think is very well done in the way the film just is able to be very unique from the comic genre and such a saturated market, especially today. It's able to stand out and create such an interesting world that I wish was explored more and more sequels. And it's sad to say that the sequel that we did get wasn't really that good, and it will be likely that we'll ever get a sequel to this actual universe ever again if it isn't a reboot, which sucks because I love this universe and I love these characters. But as for this standalone movie, I still think it's a fantastic comic book movie, one of the best of its kind, still to this day. And if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. Number 84.
이 냄새였구나.
The Handmaiden is a beautiful movie to say the least. It is a film that was unlike many of the films I've seen beforehand when I watched it on Amazon Prime, kind of out of the blue, kind of out of curiosity, because I heard a lot of praise from mainly Ralph the Movie Maker and a couple other YouTube creators I follow, but I did not expect the roller coaster ride of this film that would put me on for emotion. This is just such a great romance story about these two women who are basically, they grow a romance between one another about, like, you know, one's a maid for this woman is this rich family who's kind of like in this Ponzi scheme, but throughout the course of the runtime they slowly grow to a bond and they kind of turn on the main head of this family. And the way the film, you know, tends its story, it tends its characters, makes this world feel lived in and you feel like you're a part of this family. The cinematography is absolutely beautiful. The way the film directs and the way just the film shows how foreign films are just so way more complex and unique from a lot of American films. The way that show this different side of culture is so unique. For a period piece, I think is also very unique. The set design is fantastic. The production design is also on point. The directing is just so expertly handled with so much care and craft put onto the screenplay and the actors and the direction and the cinematography. That truly does feel like art. It doesn't feel like just a piece of entertainment. It feels like something that can really stick with you. The romance, which I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the romance genre, but when it's done right, it's done expertly well. It can really hit you, and the romance between the main two women in this movie just really, I think it's some of the best romance you'll see in any film to this day, in my opinion. The film, despite being a very long movie, like 2.5 hours, the film's pace is also very smooth, and because the film gets you invested in this world that you don't really feel like, by the time the film ends, it does feel like it's a natural conclusion, but you feel like you want to spend more time in this world because it's so interesting. It's just a brilliant movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, which I get, this is a foreign film. I don't know how many of you have seen this film, but if you have not seen it yet, please check it out because this is a brilliant movie. And especially since it's free on Amazon Prime, if you have it, please check it out because it's just a brilliant movie. Number 83.
Are you like a crazy person?
I'm quite sure they will say so.
V for Vendetta, another brilliant stylistically put together comic book movie that is just so much more intense and unique and perspective filling that, it's just so memorable in a way that will just stick with you a lot more than the traditional comic fare we get nowadays. The film is just so entertaining and it's so rash and it's so just bombastic in the way the film handles the screenplay and the characters and the way that it handles our mysterious character of V that we never see his face throughout the runtime. I think, again, similar to what we were talking about with Billy and Black Christmas, the way we know very little about this main character makes him so much more intriguing than if we actually did get who he was and what his backstory was like. And especially with Hugo Weaving's accent and his performance from the voice acting standpoint is just brilliant. And I love the Guy Fawkes masks that we get on the main character easily being an iconic symbol nowadays. His romance with Natalie Portman also feels very earned and feels genuine and just feels like it feels built up the entire runtime to where you get that climactic scene in the third act. It feels earned. It feels like you feel like two characters that grew a bond throughout the course of the runtime. This dictatorship and the main villains we followed throughout the runtime also very well developed, and I think it was just very intense. And you want to see this dictatorship put down. The action is also very well handled. This was kind of handled by the Wachowskis, and you can feel that Matrix flavor put onto the screenplay. The action set pieces are fantastic. The score is brilliant, especially with the use of the 1812 overture in the final reel, which I think is probably the thing that this film's most known for beyond the look of V himself. The use of alliteration that V uses is also fantastic. The iconic scene wherever him and Natalie Portman meet and he has that iconic speech, I think it's also still one of the best dialogue scenes we've seen in the 21st century. I think it's just such a fun, crazy movie that if you haven't seen it yet, I don't know how many of you have seen this movie, but if you haven't seen it, please check it out because it's a great movie. Number 82. Searching, like I was talking about with Rec, I thought that, from the trailers, I thought it would be nothing more than just a gimmick movie. Oh, look, it's a movie that's just saw on a desktop, just like Unfriended, right? But kind of like Unfriended, but a lot better in my opinion. It definitely exceeded my expectations in the way that, despite the fact that the film has limitations, I think it uses the limitations exceedingly well in a way that this story then, if it was told from a regular perspective of the way the film was shot, it wouldn't be as effective if it wasn't shot on a desktop. You know what I'm saying? The main performance in John Cho, who hasn't done a whole lot of dramatic work, I think is brilliant because, a lot of comedians know how to perform dramatic roles because they know how to do those balanced sides, and I think John Cho is just brilliant in this movie as this grieving father just trying to find his daughter. The other performance is also great as well. I think that the fact that this film actually used all the licensed stuff that we use on the internet like YouTube and Google and WhatsApp and all this different social media stuff, that isn't like fake bullshit like search.net or whatever we see in regular modern day movies, I think is also very well done because this film does a great job at making you feel like you're actually on the internet. This is not just some fake 6-year-old man writing the screenplay being like, what are the kids into nowadays? No, you can feel like this writer and this director genuinely know what social media is and how it's used nowadays, which I really do appreciate when that's explored very well in the movie. I think the story is also handled very greatly. I mean, that kind of scene with the stock photo, as I will say, I think just scenes like that would not be as effective as if this was shot like a regular movie. And the way the film tells a story, and the film has a huge reveal after huge reveal after huge reveal, and the way that the film constantly second guesses yourself and thinking you know where it's going to go, but it completely subverts your expectations in the best way possible, makes the film just so entertaining and so much fun as a theatrical experience that I think it's one of the best found footage films ever made, if you want to consider that found footage movie. But I think it's still one of the best thrillers that we've gotten, especially in the 21st century. And I think it's a brilliant movie. It's a film that proves that if you do have limitations, it doesn't mean you still can't tell a brilliant story, and I still think this is way more effective than most regularly shot movies are today. Number 81.
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up!
There Would Be Blood, a brilliant film from Paul Thomas Anderson. This is kind of like the mainstay of his kind of directorial effort, being these huge, larger-than-life, epic 2.5-hour period piece movies. And although I will say I do like his filmography, a lot of them are kind of derivative in my opinion, but this film is still a brilliant movie. I completely understand why it's still considered one of the best films ever made, especially kind of considering the main performance of Daniel Day-Lewis. You know, he's a brilliant actor that, I mean, if you know about him, you know about him. He's a guy that completely just subverts himself into a role, and just he's able to completely become a different person, which is just so interesting to see on screen. And just the way he transforms with the entire runtime, because this film takes place over the course of decades, and the way the film transcends this character from just this oil driller and becomes like this business owner, and just the way his perspective is handled, I also think is very well handled. I think the performance of him against Paul Dano as his son, I think, is great as well. That kind of like, I drink your milkshake scene is kind of like the tip on the iceberg of that. The production design, also being a period piece, is also very well handled. Everything feels real. You can tell Paul Thomas Anderson put a lot of heart and soul into this project. The score is great, the acting is brilliant, the writing is fantastic, the cinematography is bleak as hell, but I think it's handled in the best way possible, you know, mirroring the film's tone and atmosphere. It's a film that you've heard nonstop about, I would bet, and it's a film that definitely deserved all the Oscar nominations, all the praise it gets, because it's a brilliant movie. Number 80.
Get out.
Sorry, man.
Okay. Get out! Yo! Yeah! Yo, chill, man. Get out! Chill, man!
Get Out. The directorial debut from Jordan Peele, and it's one of the essential films that I think 50 years from now people will say this is one of the mainstays of the modern day 21st century genre and film. And I think there's definitely a reason why it can be on that pedestal of iconic films from the 2010s. Once again, that's some of the best horror films. It's a simple story, but I think it's handled expertly well from the directing and the writing of Jordan Peele, who up until this point had only done comedy sketches, and you can tell this guy really had an idea that he wanted to do for years, and it's just handled so well when he's put onto the screen. So many actors, especially the main kind of the breakout performance from Daniel Kaluuya as this main character, just regular Joe walking the situation, and you realize that he's kind of the target of a situation that you don't realize what the plan is yet. And then as the film reveals its certain twists and turns that I think all of you know what it is, but I won't spoil it regardless. But the way the film handles its twists and turns, and the way the film just takes you on this ride, and the film has great messages to where it doesn't feel pandering, even though it could have been. I think the film handles racism in a way that I think is very explored well, to where it's not just people saying the N-word, or, you know, it's very obvious stuff like that. The way the film handles racism in a very unique way, in like a toxic positive way, I think is very unique in the way that most films don't really handle or have the balls to handle, which I do respect. The atmosphere is incredibly created well. You know, there's so many iconic shots, like the sunken place is great. You get that scene with like the deer antlers, or like the cotton scene wherever like Daniel Kaluuya is stuck in that basement with the pool table, or the crochet ball, or, you know, the whole thing with the eyes after the camera flashes and you get Lakeith Stanfield going, "Get out, get out." This is one of the few films I've seen in theaters to this day, to when I saw it in theaters, the entire audience I saw with it was a packed crowd on a Saturday night. They were all entranced in the movie. I mean, especially when you get to the third act, when you get the cotton scene where Daniel Kaluuya puts the cotton out of his ears, the entire audience was like rooting and hollering. You get a little Ray Howard, it's probably his best performance as like the sidekick to Daniel Kaluuya, his friend. And whenever he shows up, the film, like the audience claps and cheers, and there's the entire audience was just so in suspense. It's just so enthralled with what was going on that it just makes for such a fun experience that I still miss to this day. But as for the film itself, it's still a great thriller in my opinion. I understand why it got all the praise and all the Oscar noms it got, because it's just such a unique horror film that I think just made everyone so excited to see what Jordan Peele does. And I cannot wait to see what this guy does next in the future. Number 79.
Hey there. Do animals talk in this dimension? Because I don't want to freak them out.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is a movie that I really didn't have much expectations for. The marketing didn't really do a whole lot for me, and the fact that, you know, it just kind of seemed like so much is trying to cash in on the Spider-Man name in different ways, and it was just kind of one of them. And especially after Venom came out, I really didn't have a whole lot of hopes, because outside the Raimi movies and the MCU Spider-Man films, which really, I mean, it's more or less Disney's movies, Sony really didn't have a really track record from doing the Spider-Man property justice. But I still gave the movie a chance opening weekend, seeing it with a good friend of mine, and I was actually blown away by it with how good it was. Phil Lord and Chris Miller produced the movie, and I think it was a hand in the writer's room, and you can definitely tell. Their style's all over this movie in the best way possible. Their style of comedy and action is just so unique from all the other directors out there that just film just sticks out like a sore thumb in the best way possible. The voice acting from the entire cast is fantastic. All the different iterations of Spider-Man that we get, from Peter B. Parker, of course Miles, the main character, Spider-Ham, Noir Spider-Man, Penny Parker, just all these different variations of Spider-Man that, although are definitely have their place and are definitely like there to kind of be the comic relief and be unique and bounce off Peter or Miles a lot, they also have a very good emotional arc in here as well. Everyone in here has a destination they want to go towards as a character, and they all feel satisfying by the very end. The action's brilliant, the animation is just absolutely stellar. I mean, Sony created a whole different like animation technique with this movie, and it just sticks out in the best way possible. This movie is so entertaining, so fluid, so vast and fast-paced, and just so unique amongst the superhero genre, and I think a lot better than most anime superhero movies out there, given the fact that it has so much more of a higher budget, so much more care and work put into the story and the characters, while being hilarious and also very emotionally investing. It's a great comic book movie that really does feel like a comic book come to life in the best way possible. The illusions are great, the animation's fantastic, the voice acting for the entire cast is great. It's just a brilliant Spider-Man film, and I cannot wait to see when the sequel comes out next year. Number 78.
I love those redheads, man.
I know you. We had geography together, remember?
Dazed and Confused is one of the many Richard Linklater films you'll see on this list, and he's just one of the best filmmakers working today. He's just such a personal director that has like such a vast filmography that just is so character-centric and so dynamic that I just love him as a director whenever he comes out with something. And Dazed and Confused is kind of like the first big hit he has had as a director. This was a film that I heard a lot of things about, and I kind of picked up on Blu-ray from Target one day as kind of like a curious watch to see what it is about, and it's a movie that really took me by surprise, and I really enjoyed it. I love movies that take place over the course of a simple time period, like over the course of like a day or an afternoon. And you know, Linklater's done that very well with like the Before trilogy, and here it's set over the course of one day when school gets out during the 70s, and just the feeling of summer, the feeling of like getting out and having the whole summer ahead of you. I love that feeling. I love when we get to April or May, and you just feel like relaxed because you know you can like spend the next couple of months just in the atmosphere of summer. I love the fact that this film oozes that type of feeling out of me. I love the cast. I mean, there's so many great upcoming actors in this film right before they blew up, like Ben Affleck, Matthew McConaughey, Parker Posey, Milla Jovovich. So many A-listers nowadays start here, and they're all fantastic in their small roles. You know, Linklater has a great way of dialogue and writing to where each and every single character, no matter how minuscule, has a place in their story, and each feels memorable in their own way. I love the soundtrack. This is one of the few 70s films, you know, of that time period, or at least like of these type of Renaissance movies. We're getting that nowadays with like the 80s and 90s with Stranger Things and Fear Street. And this one doesn't really hit you over the head with a nostalgia beam. It kind of like feels natural within the story when they start playing Summer by War or School's Out for Summer. You know, it just oozes that 70s atmosphere that feels organic within the story. The film has a very simple plot structure, but it's just so entertaining just being around all these different people. And the way the film matures, as the way the film progresses, I think is very exciting and very unexpected for a film like this. I don't know, I really enjoy it. It's a great teen movie, great characters, great directing and writing from Linklater, great editing, great production design, making it feel like the 70s. It's just a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. Number 77. This Is the End is my favorite Seth Rogen comedy by far, and I love Seth Rogen as a comedian. I think a lot of his films, for me, they hit on a different level than most people, just because I think he's just such a naturally likable guy. He's a little quirky with like putting his faces on Instagram and stuff like that, but I really enjoy him as an actor and as a comedian, and all of his friends I think are very funny as well for the most part. And whenever he comes up with a new movie like Neighbors or Long Shot, which I really enjoyed, he just has a natural way of just being likable in my opinion. And this film has such a fun concept about the end of the world, which nowadays is kind of, it ages like fine wine, which is kind of strange, but about being the end of the world, I mean stuck in this one house, James Franco's house for the entire runtime, and you really focus on these 6 celebrities having to adjust to the way that the world is, and the way that the film has different cameos. You get Paul Rudd, you get Emma Watson, one of her best roles in my opinion. I think she's hilarious in this. Just so many great comedians just being able to really step up. I love the chemistry between Seth Rogen, James Franco, Jonah Hill, Jay Baruchel, and just so many others that just, this cast is just such an ensemble piece that it's just so much fun to watch. The comedy timing is great, the editing's fantastic, the production design is also really good. A little wonky CGI, but for the most part I think it's really well handled, making it feel like the apocalypse that they're living in. The film's so fast paced, so entertaining, so funny, has some good character arcs in here which I didn't expect. But I think the film has a little more resonance than just being a stupid comedy. Learn to appreciate life and learn to, you know, trust who's really a part of your side and learn to look out for yourself. I don't know. I think it's a really good movie. I think it's really funny, really entertaining, really fast-paced, really well directed and written, and a lot of good comedy off the cuff from the actors, which in a comedy, especially with a high-budget Hollywood comedy like this nowadays, is very hit or miss when it comes to improvising, but I think the film does it very well. It's just a movie that's perfectly timed, perfectly paced, a lot of fun. And I think nowadays, I think it ages better than most films of this magnitude. But overall, I think it's a great movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. Number 76.
We're gonna get you, not another peep, kinda go to sleep.
Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead was one of the mainstays of the 80s slasher genre that really kind of defined how to make a low-budget horror film, in my opinion, and is one of the best of its kind, in my opinion. Yes, it is dated in some aspects. Yes, you could throw it away and just be like, this is just 80s cheese. If it's not for you, it's not for you, but for me, I personally love it, and I think it's very inspiring as an upcoming filmmaker myself who wants to be in the industry, showing that even for no money, for a bunch of inexperienced people at the time, can make something just so magical and just so much fun as The Evil Dead. King of a huge franchise which is still going on to this day. Sam Raimi's still an iconic director. He's doing, Doctor Strange right now. He's done tons of great movies beyond this, including these sequels that we'll talk about later on in this list. Bruce Campbell became an icon in the horror genre, and just films in general, in my opinion. And just so many iconic shots and moments, like the camera zooming through the woods, or the demons, we're gonna get you, or like the woman underneath the floorboards. Just so many great, like the sound design in this film, I think is genuinely creepy. Like the tile sequence alone just kind of shivers chills down my spine. I think the film's incredibly entertaining. Yes, it's not the scariest film in the world, but I think it's really fun if you're in for a cheesy early 80s slasher possession type movie. Being stuck in this cabin in the woods, I think it really oozes that atmosphere very well. Has some really good soundtrack, production design in this like beat up little cabin. Feeling isolated, all the characters, it's just a lot of fun. I think that for the acting, yes, it's not the best, but I think it works for what the film's going for. It just has this charm to it that for me kind of ages timelessly, in my opinion. It's very fun, it's a good slasher movie. It's very fun. It's a really good horror possession movie. I think the makeup's great. I think the gore's really handled well. Sam Raimi's kind of known for that. And it's just an extremely fun film, and I think, for me, I think it ages better than most horror films in the 80s. Number 75. Mission Impossible Fallout, I think, is by far the best Mission Impossible film that's ever been made. And as we're saying for a 6th film in the franchise, man, apart from Friday the 13th, I can't think of a franchise where the 6th installment is the best of the franchise. And I think this film just does what the previous films did well and just does it in spades better. I think Christopher McQuarrie coming back to direct, which is the first time in the franchise where a recurring director comes back. Previously, they only had one director per film because Tom Cruise liked it. I think McQuarrie did such a great job in directing. He also did really good with Jack Reacher, and this is no exception. The actor's fantastic. I love when films are actually able to use practical effects and be actually use choreography and not just rely on CGI to, replace or enhance the fight scenes. Like, all it feels real, all it feels, organic and natural, and it flows, and it's just way more exciting than most films we get nowadays that are big budgets. The score is fantastic from Lauren Balfe. I think the acting across the whole board is fantastic. Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, Rebecca Ferguson, Henry Cavill as the main villain, I think he's fantastic and charming as ever. The film's exciting, it actually has stakes to it. You can feel that throughout the entire runtime, there's a weight to it. It's not just like a bunch of people just running around fighting. You feel the stakes of the situation. I think that the film's really intensely edited, really good in the writing stage and the directing stage. I think the film's just incredibly fun, incredibly fast-paced, incredibly exciting and entertaining. And I cannot wait to see how this franchise wraps up with 7 and 8 in the future, especially with McQuarrie coming back to direct and write. It's a brilliant action movie in my opinion. I think it's one of the best of its kind, especially for American audiences. Number 74. Nightcrawler is an incredibly creepy movie. This is a film that I heard a lot about before watching it, and all the hype the film surrounded, I think definitely lived up to it. I think this film is a fantastic thriller, and I think all the hype surrounding it really did live up to the expectations, but I think this is a fantastic thriller. I think the late performance of Jake Gyllenhaal as his main guy is trying to record the news to try to get his name out there, try to get his footage out there, and the slimy way his attitude is, and the way he'll just do anything in order to, receive validation from his peers, I think is very, very creepy, and Jake Gyllenhaal sells it in spades. I still think it's his best performance to this day, and that's the thing a lot considering how great of an actor Gyllenhaal is. I think his chemistry with Riz Ahmed really does make the movie, and the way that relationship goes and towards the end I think is very tragic in a way that makes you question the character even more. Having a main character being so ambiguous in terms of morals, I think leads to a film being very interesting and complex when handled right, and I think this film does it well in spades. I think directing's fantastic. I think the small scale the film introduces, I think makes the film feel more personal and feel a lot more, it makes you feel like you're a part of the crew, recording these ambulance drivers driving late night to see what crime they have to stumble across. The atmosphere and just the lighting of the city at night I think is very effective in Los Angeles, and just making you feel like you're down and dirty with this main character. I think that just the lighting's great, the directing's fantastic, the writing's great, the pace is really good, the film's creepy in the best ways possible. I think it's an incredibly good thriller, and I wish more films were like this that were put out in the mainstream. Number 73.
Don't say it. Don't you say it. Left. Come on!
Captain America: The Winter Soldier, another film from 2014, was a movie that not a lot of people were really expecting to be as good as it was. The first Avenger was a movie that I think a lot of people did like, but I don't really think people loved. And Captain America and the Avengers was good, but I will say mainly because of his suit, the guy really wasn't much of a standout in my opinion beyond his beef with Robert Downey Jr. in the film. And coming to this character that really didn't have a whole lot of reputation going into this second movie of his trilogy, this film really did blow open the door for what you can do with a solo movie. It wasn't just another cog in the wheel to build to the next Avengers film. You can have a great story within this solo universe, and yes, you don't bring the other Avengers with you minus Black Widow, which we'll get into, but it makes the film feel more emotionally rich, makes the film have more stakes to it, and actually has an impact on the MCU in a way that makes the film feel important and feel engaging within its film's context. I think the Russo brothers coming for the first time in the directorship for an MCU film when all they did previously was You, Me, and Dupree and a couple of episodes of Community, and they kind of started that show, but they didn't really have a whole lot of experience behind them as directors. And coming into this and just having some of the best choreography in the MCU up until Shang-Chi, I think is brilliant and so surprising the way that the film handles his direction. I think the film's written fantastically, the way the film calls back to the first Avenger and the Avengers, and the way it sets up Cease to be Captain America's main arc that goes through Endgame, I think is really well set up, and that's what makes this universe so well put together, is the way that they all tie into one another. But on its own, I still think it's fantastic. The action's fantastic. So many of the best MCU fight scenes are in this film, like the elevator fight scene or the opening sequence on the boats. all great. The costume design of Captain America, especially like the main suit he wears in the beginning with like the whole darkened look he has, which is a lot better than the Avengers, to when he has to fight in his old World War II outfit in the climax, I think is also very well. The cast is fantastic. Anthony Mackie as the Falcon, great introduction here. He has Chris Evans has great chemistry with Scarlett Johansson coming back from the Avengers. Samuel Jackson is great in his minor role here. Alexander Pierce, I think, is one of the best villains of the MCU, and Robert Redford does a great job in this villainy role. Frank Grillo is fantastic as the side role in Crossbones. I just think everything was just firing on all cylinders with this film. It's just so exciting, so action-packed, so emotionally investing, especially like when you get the scene with Peggy Carter in the hospital. The film doesn't forget that actually has weight to it, and by the end, the film actually has an emotional impact as well as an impact on the universe. It's not just another generic comedy road trip MCU film. It has way more emotional stakes than you realize, and I think the film really, that's why so many people still consider it to be the best or one of the best films in the MCU, and I definitely agree with that. It's a brilliant movie, and I wish more MCU films were like it in the future, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, it's a great movie, and I still think it's the best Captain America film we've gotten to this day. Number 72. The Exorcist, similarly to what I talked about with Gone Girl, was one of the few films I was not allowed to watch when I was younger because my mom was actually scarred by this film by a bad babysitter when she was super young, and I was not allowed to watch this film until I was old enough to watch it, like in high school and stuff. And although I wasn't necessarily disturbed by it on the level as she was, I still think the film is incredibly creepy and incredibly effective. I understand why this film is still considered to be one of the scariest films ever made, even like nearly 50 years later. This film is incredibly suspenseful and atmospheric. The possession scenes that are mainly dominating the second and third act of the movie, I think, are incredibly well paced, and the way the film builds up to the climax, was starting with simple things like Regan biting the hand, or whenever she transforms in the bed, and like, you know, sticks the crotch in her, you know, no place, and the way she throws objects around the room, and the way that she transforms into Pazuzu is incredibly effective. And the way this demon Pazuzu is introduced in the film, I think is a lot more effective than the fact we don't really know what it is. I think it's still more effective than most horror villains not knowing the origins. I think it's just incredibly creepy. The entire cast is fantastic. I mean, you get Linda Blair in a really early role here, and it kind of sucks that she didn't really do much after this. Mainly just because of how much it scarred her, but she's brilliant as the main character of Reagan. Her mom's fantastic. Max von Sydow, the late Max von Sydow, as the main father comes in the third act. Jason Miller is the main priest that has this loss of faith and has to regain it throughout the course of the movie. It's a great arc. The score is fantastic. Directing from William Friedkin's fantastic. William Peter Bligh does a great job in the screenplay direction, and there's no reason why, when he would direct Exorcist 3, that he would contain so many great elements that made that film great, which we'll talk about later on. Great just atmosphere and the direction and the lighting, and just some of the iconic shots from the face of Pazuzu, the iconic poster with Max von Sydow walking at the house and the lights blaring in his face. The ending whenever like Jason Miller jumps out the window, or the bed where she's in the cross Jesus Christ pose. It's just so atmospheric, so creepy, so well paced, and so methodical, and just way more than just a simple possession movie. And this will forever change the game for the horror genre, and it's so effective nearly 50 years later. It's a great movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out because it's a bona fide classic. Number 71.
Detective!
You're looking for me.
Seven is still one of the creepiest thrillers I've ever seen. It was kind of the film that kind of opened the door for David Fincher. Before he's only done music videos in Alien 3, which really wasn't positively received. And this was his true first film, in my opinion, and this is a great movie. It seemed like a simple thriller walking into it, but just the way the film builds a story, builds its characters very well. The relationship we get between Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman is really well handled, and they're basically the heartbeat of the film. And just the chemistry is basically the backbone of the film. I mean, the way that Morgan Freeman is basically this old detective about to, on the brink of retirement, and you get Brad Pitt's new rookie on the force, very hot-headed, very, he wants to solve this case as fast as possible, but both of them have to come together, and they clash constantly, which is very entertaining to see on screen. The main villain that we get in Kevin Spacey as the main killer, John Doe. No matter what you think of him as a person in real life, I still think that his performance in this film is very creepy, maybe because he's creepy in real life, but he's just incredibly creepy as a villain, and the fact that we don't see him for most of the runtime makes the film have suspense to it, makes the film have weight. The way the film shies away from the gore could have been very, very misleading and very teasing in a way that would have been negatively towards the film. But the way that the film doesn't show the gore and only shows the aftermath, the way that Fincher directs the film is just so creepy and so dark that the way that the film really only makes you imagine what could have happened before we stumble across the bodies is way more effective than had we gone full gore like the Saw movies, which you can see so much of the blueprint of the Saw movies be placed in this film because it's just so creepy. It's so just dark with how the film builds this world and its characters, and just everything in this film just feels like there's something bad about to happen. There's no scene in this film where it feels safe. Like even scenes like with they're at the dinner table with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman and Gwyneth Paltrow as Brad Pitt's wife. There's always just this dark undertone to everything that just makes the film have that much more weight to it. Of course, the iconic ending, which leaves you in a state where like you don't know what to think, and I still think it's one of the best third acts of any film. It's just brilliantly handled out, and the way the film just subverts the expectations in the way that makes the film exciting, entertaining, and just enthralling with the way the film just presents itself and the way the film concludes. I think it's just a perfect way to end the movie. It's a great thriller. It's a great mystery. It's a fantastic drama in ways too. It's just a great movie in general, and if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. Number 70.
Some people hate the English, I don't. They're just wankers. We, on the other hand, are colonised by wankers. Can't even find a decent culture to be colonised by.
Trainspotting was kind of like the first major film that I would say Danny Boyle was kind of known for in his career. I mean, he's honestly one of my favorite filmmakers still working today. He's made so many fantastic movies like 28 Days Later. He's made 127 Hours, Sunshine, Steve Jobs. I mean, the guy's a brilliant filmmaker, and this is kind of the film for me that introduced him to the masses. I think it's still one of his best films to this day, probably his best movie in my opinion. The way the film, it's a simple story about these four, kind of low-hanging fruit druggies who basically, live life in the way they want to, but their life is very scummy, very dirty. I mean, you get the scenes like with the baby in the hotel, which will just scar you for life, or like the scene with the toilet where they have to dig inside that dirty toilet. It makes you like question and makes you really not want to take drugs ever in your life just because how scummy their life is. But these characters are so endearing and just so interesting that you can't help but just want to be around them and just want to hear their monologues and you just want to hear them whenever they're on their highs, because they're just so interesting of characters that are just complex in my opinion, and that's what makes the best films. The soundtrack's fantastic. The way the film's directed by Danny Boyle, I still think has a way more personal touch than if anyone else directed the movie. He has his general stance as a director on this film and just makes it so much more memorable than if it was directed by anybody else. It's way more than just a simple drug story. I think the film is just well directed, well written, well paced. Just well scored as well. It's just a great movie overall, and it's a movie that I think will stick with you way after the credits roll, because it's just such a great movie, a great story, great characters, and it'll just make you realize how scummy life can be, but also what not to do while doing drugs, I guess. But yeah, it's a great movie. If you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. Number 69.
What the hell are you?
Logan is a movie that I was extremely hyped for when I saw it in theaters. I mean, this was easily my most anticipated film of the year when it came out like 4 years ago. I remember me and my friend back in 8th grade were like constantly obsessed with this film, and we would send each other DMs of like whenever we would get like a new set photo or a new photo released from a magazine or a new poster or a new TV spot. It was just all like, we were so hyped for this film, and personally for me, just because knowing that it would be Hugh Jackman's last Wolverine film, the fact that it would be R-rated for the first time ever in this universe, just hyped me up so much, just because of the concept of what you could do with an R-rated Wolverine film. And this film lived up to all my expectations in the best way possible. This film is a fantastic final chapter for Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart, as well as Professor X, in the way that it really reflects on how long these characters have been portrayed by these actors, in the way that although the film has a wonky timeline of like, we really don't know what films take place in, which again, that's not really uncommon for an X-Men film in this universe, but the way the film calls back to the first X-Men film, realizing how long these characters have been portrayed by these actors, and seeing this journey to where like these little kids who watched the first X-Men film are now adults watching. It's kind of like a Toy Story 3 effect, to where like there's so much more weight on the shoulders because of how long these characters have been around. But beyond the nostalgia of those characters, just the film itself just has a great story about Wolverine just being this burnt out limo driver who's just kind of lost all faith and just all he wants to do is just blow his brains out. learning to live again, learning to care about other people again in this little girl played by Daphne King, fantastic as X-23. And it sucks that she really hasn't done much after this movie. I mean, I know she's on the HBO show, like His Dark Materials, but she's not like a mainstay actress, and I don't know why, because she's brilliant in this really small role here in X-23. Doesn't really get a whole lot of speaking lines until the third act. And she just does a great job portraying, having that kind of buddy relationship with Logan that kind of grows over the course of the movie. James Mangold in the directing chair is just brilliant. He's a great director and is no exception. The way that he handles the action scenes, the way he handles the emotional scenes, the way the film builds up his atmosphere, and the way he builds up this world is just so grimy and just so desolate and just so hopeless. The way the film portrays his character arcs, where you get these characters who are basically at the end of their lifespan, learning to care about others, learning to, kind of bring out one last journey in them, I think is very inspiring, just very engaging because you've been with these people for so long. The brutal violence for the first time, finally getting to see Wolverine stab people without it being cut away or just CGI, or like bloodless. Great action that is just the tip of the iceberg, because this film is not just about the action, it's not just about the gore. It's so much more than that, but when you get those action scenes, it's just so well timed, so well paced, and so well directed. That's just so exciting, especially the opening sequence whenever you get that introduction to this new Wolverine in Hugh Jackman, just old, burnt out, pissed Wolverine that just starts beating up these guys and stabbing them in the forehead with his claws. It's just so exciting. The film's emotionally investing, the film's so exciting. The film has a great production design, making this desolate world feel desolate, and the way the film has its atmosphere and dark tone and dark mood to it. It has some good comedic stuff in here too, but the film for the most part just feels so unique and just so different, and I'm so glad that we got a film like this in the X-Men universe. And it's a film that we'll never see again, at least from this type of Marvel property, because we know that Disney is not going to go R-rated if it's not something like Deadpool. And that kind of sucks, because this film is just such a great catalyst for what can come and what you can do with the comic genre outside the big blockbuster stuff. But yeah, it's an amazing film, and it's still one of my favorite X-Men films, if not my favorite X-Men film to this day. Number 68.
Stop this one with your father. I'm stopping this one now.
Don't, okay? Let me finish. I gotta prove it.
Prove what?
I'm not a mistake.
Creed is a movie that I don't think anyone expected much from. I mean, this is a film that came out at a time where Sylvester Stallone kind of did a lot of shitty projects where they weren't the best, like Bolton the Head or The Expendables 3, and it just kind of seemed like a cheap cash grab that tried to just cash on the Rocky name and the sensation of it. And this was at a time where Ryan Coogler was not a huge director. This was before he did Black Panther. He really only did Fruitfulization, which is a great movie, but he wasn't a known director. Michael B. Jordan, he just did Fan Forster. It was a terrible movie a couple months prior. He wasn't really a huge actor yet as well. And, this seemed like a Rocky no pun intended, but this kind of seemed like a weird project from the get-go. And it proved everybody wrong, including me. This is a fantastic sequel, in my opinion. It's still the best sequel of the Rocky franchise. We'll see what Creed 3 does, but it has some tall shoes to fill against this movie. The way the film builds off the previous movies with Rocky Balboa is still doing his thing. You have Adonis Creed, being the kind of the estranged son of Apollo, and the way they interact and the way that, they have to come to terms, and Rocky reluctantly starts training him, and the way the film builds as the film progresses and as their bond grows, and you learn way more about Adonis, and he just makes for such a complex and emotional character that, wants to live up to his father's name and just prove that he's not a mistake, prove that he's just, not just a name, and that it's just so powerful within the film's context. The boxing sequences are fantastic. I mean, that one shot whenever Adonis is fighting his first real foe in the ring, I think is great. I think the Williams well scored, well directed, well paced, so emotionally investing, so well done, so inspiring, that just makes you want to punch your fist in the air, just scream, whenever Adonis wins the fight at the very end, like the best Rocky films do. It's just so emotionally investing, so enthralling, so entertaining, just a really well-rounded movie, and I just think it shows that, no matter what spin-offs can do, I think this proves that, any project can have its emotional investment. And I think if a project has a really good idea, I think it can succeed at the very end, and it just proved everybody wrong with how great this film is. Number 67.
Clever girl.
Jurassic Park is a film that needs no introduction. I mean, it's one of Spielberg's best films to this day. It's the film that really, along with Terminator 2, kind of revolutionized the introduction of CGI and integration of it within the practical effects of the movie. I mean, I still think it mostly holds up nearly, 30 years later. It's a brilliant movie. I mean, come on. You know, it's just such a good, fun adventure film that has the thrillers of what you want from a adventure movie, but also the wonder and the imagination and just the, you know, awe-inspiring stuff of this film. It makes it so investing. It makes this world just so unique. I completely understand why it's become a franchise, because this world is just so investing. The way that Spielberg directs the movie and the way the film's paced out and the way the film's writing by David Koepp really just explores this world very well, that you want to see more from this universe. The characters are all fantastic. They're all iconic characters. You know, Dr. Malcolm, Ian Grant, Ellie Sattler, you get the lawyer, you get the two kids, you get, of course, John Hammond, the head of the theme park himself, and it's just all fantastic. I mean, every single character in this film, even like small roles like Wayne Knight and Samuel L. Jackson, are just all iconic and all just have their staples in pop culture and film culture. The practical effects are fantastic, the CGI, a little wonky at times, but I still think it holds decently well. The score by John Williams, like I talked about with Jaws, I mean, come on, like, there's no introduction, it's a brilliant score, he's just a brilliant composer, and just makes, I just can't imagine being the guy who could just make so many iconic scores. He just does it every single time, and just, this is no exception. The way the film handles the suspense and actually is a horror movie at times. It's not afraid to get gore. It's not afraid to show kills, which I think is very fun and I think is very interesting. And I wish more Jurassic Park films were like it and able to show more. And the way the film handles practical and CGI and blends together is damn near seamless. I think the film's so investing. The production design is fantastic. It's a brilliant movie, and I can't wait to see how this film story wraps up with Jurassic World Dominion coming next summer. Hopefully, it's better than Fallen Kingdom. Number 66.
Down, George. You're out of control.
Shut the fuck up, Clyde!
Mean Creek is a very simple movie that most people really don't know a whole lot about, minus the whole iconic Josh Peck cursing scene, which has kind of become a meme at this point. But this is a film that I think has a lot more to offer than just that one scene. I think it's brilliant within the film's context and a lot darker when you realize what the film's actually about. But it's just such a great coming-of-age movie about these teens planning to do this prank on Josh Peck for bullying Roy Culkin in the film. And the way the film handles his characters, I think, is a lot more complex than most teen movies will ever be. And the way the film's not afraid to shy away from the darker side of growing up. The film's not afraid to show the consequences for these characters. They're not, you know, bulletproof. They're not immune from law enforcement. And I think the film actually handles the subject matter very well, a lot more professionally, a lot more maturely than most stuff you'll see on Netflix nowadays. The simple nature of this story, I think, also allows the film to be mainly focused on character development, and each character gets something to do and has some sort of important role in the story, and at least the film having a lot more weight to it and making each character feel like a genuine human being. They all feel like actual teenagers versus most stuff you see. You know what I'm saying? You know, the way the film handles its expression design. Also, I love the setting of the woods throughout most of the runtime. I love movies that are mostly set with the course of only a simple day, and the majority of the films is only set over its course of a simple afternoon. And the way the film changes the characters' lives so drastically, and showing that one simple event can affect the rest of your life, I think is done expertly well by the directing and the writing. The film's directing is fantastic. I love the writing in this film. The score is fantastic, and the soundtrack is just brilliant as well. And the film just has so much more weight to it, and leads to the film meriting a lot more discussion after leaving the movie versus most teen movies you see nowadays. It's just a great coming-of-age film. I think it's great acting across the board. Of course, Josh Peck, I still think is his best performance to this day as his main bully, and the way the film peels back the layers and showing how complex this character really is just makes the film feel that much more investing, a lot more devastating when you see the final results of what the film does to his character. It's just such a great movie, and please, if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out, because I definitely know that the majority of people who are watching this video probably have not seen this film or really only know it because of the Josh Peck meme, but it's so much more than that. Number 65.
Nice shooting, son. What's your name?
Murphy.
Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop is one of the main staples of the 80s, and just one of the most iconic characters coming out of that decade, and for good reason. It is a fantastic film that birthed this character. So we're talking about with Jurassic Park. I think the film explores this world very well, and the way that Verhoeven and the writing team really built out this world and these characters, and just showing the dystopian side of humanity. And the way the film blends practical effects and some visual effects, I think, is very well done. Yes, there are some goofy, outdated CGI claymation stuff, especially with like the I forgot, like the 210s, what they're called, like the main machines that the main villain is trying to produce versus the RoboCop experiment that our main character is going through. It's a little wonky at times, but I still think it adds a charm to it, in my opinion. I don't know, there's just something about this film that's just so unique and just so interesting and so it's just so much fun, in my opinion. The score is fantastic. The main look of Peter Weller in this robot suit, I think, is very well done. The way that he's able to replicate a robot so well with his robotic movements, I think is very well done, and I still think it's his best performance by far in his career. His relationship with Nancy Allen is also very well done. I love Dick Halloran as the villain. The gore is very well done and very over the top as expected for a Paul Verhoeven movie, but I think it's handled very well. It's just such a great sci-fi concept brought to life by great characters, great acting, great writing, great directing, great production design, great satire, which makes the film have a lot more weight to it, a lot more than just a simple action thriller. You know, the way the film handles its consumerism messages and its, you know, environmental messages. I think the film is just so multi-layered in a way that doesn't feel pretentious. It's just like, it makes this world feel more lived in and way more complex than previously realized. It's a great movie, and it's still a classic that holds up nearly 40 years later, and you can see why this film remains unmatched amongst a very disappointing franchise as a whole, but it's still a great movie. Number 64. The Exorcist 3 is a fantastic sequel, and I think it's definitely better than the original, which is saying a lot because I also love the original as well. I mean, I just got done talking about it. It's just a fantastic sequel that no one really talks about that much. I mean, it has the Shout Factor release, it has a low cult following, but it just feels like the majority of the population of film goers just don't, you know, consider this film like, you know, canon. And it sucks that David Gordon Green doing his new Exorcist trilogy is going to negate this one, because I think this is a fantastic way to bridge the gap between the original and this movie, and ignore Exorcist 2 completely because that film's terrible. But the way the film builds up the first film is able to bring over characters and explore different themes in a way that feels so unique and so different that you expect for a sequel. You know, The Exorcist already is a film that really doesn't merit a sequel that much, but the way that William Peter Bligh, the author of the original film and the writer of the previous Exorcist film, is able to translate these films and these themes and these characters so well that makes the film so emotionally rich, makes the film so character-centric in a way that makes the film so investing and entertaining and complex in a way that you don't expect for a horror sequel. The scares of this film are so well timed and so well paced. I mean, you saw the jump scare with the woman with the big shears. I still think that's the best jump scare in any film, in my opinion. The atmosphere and just the dark mood nature of this film is just so well done, and it's just so creepy and just so underlyingly just dark. And unlike most horror films I've seen in my entire life, the main draw for this film for me is Brad Dourif as Patient X, the Gemini killer. He's a fantastic villain, and the way that Brad Dourif portrays him, I still think is his best role to this day, even over Chucky the Killer Doll, which is saying a lot. The scenes in Cellblock between Kinderman, our main character played by George C. Scott, fantastic character, and Brad Dourif, it's just so tantalizing and just so creepy and just so investing and just so eye-catching that you just can't but like not watch the screen just to see what's going to happen next between these characters, because every dialogue scene that comes out of these characters' mouth, it's just so iconic and just so creepy and just so well done. And I think the film is just so well done. It's so creepy, it's so intense and atmospheric, and it's so unique for an Exorcist sequel that I think is the only worthy follow-up in this franchise. We'll see what David Gordon Green does with a trilogy, but I think it's the only good Exorcist follow-up that we've gotten since the original. I think the theatrical cut is a way better version than the director's cut. I think the ending's a lot better. I think that the third act thing is a lot better, especially the iconic imagery. I think it's just so creepy and just so, I don't know, it's classic Exorcist imagery that I think is handled in the best way possible, and also the fact that just the footage also doesn't really hold that well, but I think though overall that the film is just paced better and well rounded than what we got originally in the director's say. But it shouldn't have been titled Exorcist 3. That's what sucks. I think that's the main reason why people have just turned their heads towards this film, because they're like, oh, Exorcist 3, well, Exorcist 2 sucked, so why should I watch Exorcist 3, you know? I call it Legion. I think that's its true title, but regardless, it's a fantastic film, whatever you call it. It's a great sequel, and I don't think any sequel in this franchise will ever be matched the brilliance of this film. Number 63. Casino Royale is a fantastic James Bond film in a way that reinvented the franchise in a way that I personally loved. Now, to state my consensus as a Bond fan, I'm not a huge fan of James Bond. I have seen all of his films, even the unofficial ones, and although I do like the majority of them, a lot of them for me have kind of fallen in the good category but not great category. But the exception of License to Kill, I really enjoy License to Kill. That's a very underrated film, but Casino Royale and another group Bond film we'll talk about later on are the only Bond films, in my opinion, that I genuinely do love. This film really does fix a lot of the issues I have with previous Bond movies. For one, it's a lot darker, and I think that the film's a lot more intense, and just feels the ends of a Ian Fleming novel a lot better than the other incarnations this character has done. I like the fact that this Daniel Craig series is the first of this iteration to actually have continuity and actually have a story that progresses even to now No Time to Die coming out, which I'm so excited for. Unlike the previous Bond films, it almost felt like an anthology to where like none of the films, even the darkest ones like On Her Majesty's Secret Service, had no weight to them when you get into the next movie. I mean, it has one of the best villains of a Bond movie. I think Mads Mikkelsen is like a terrifying villain, especially when you get to like the iconic rope scene. He's just so well done in that aspect. Jeffrey Wright as his right-hand man, James Bond, I think is great. Even Green's fantastic as the love interest. Judi Dench coming back from the Brosnan era, I think is great. And Daniel Craig as his actor at the time that really hadn't done anything beyond Layer Cake and a couple other minor roles like Road to Perdition. He's such a naturally good James Bond. He's able to have that charisma, have that smug nature to him, but he's also so raw and he's just so untamed whenever like you get that opening sequence wherever he's like in the embassy and just blows up that entire embassy base. You know, he's a very unhinged Bond, which I do prefer, other than like the classy James Bond that we all kind of know from the stereotypes. The actor's fantastic. The Martin Campbell coming back from GoldenEye, I think he did a way better job in here than he did with that film. I think the film's handled very well. I think the score is very well done. Has my favorite Bond song of all time, and You Know My Name by Chris Cornell, rest in peace. A great song, whatever version you play. The score is great. I think the action is fantastic. The pacing's great. The small scale nature of it, being stuck in this casino for most of the runtime, is a very creative way of how the film is being able to handle the story and characters in this confined setting, which you don't really get for any other James Bond movie, in my opinion. It's just a fantastic Bond film. I cannot see how this character ends up with No Time to Die coming out next month. Number 62.
You mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling.
Inception. What can I say about this film that hasn't already been said about it? It is a brilliant blockbuster by the amazing Christopher Nolan, as always. This is a film that, for me, really rewatching it second time in an IMAX theater before Tenet came out last year, really like and boosted my expectations for this film and made me appreciate a lot more than I previously had. It's a fantastic thriller, a fantastic action sci-fi concept about like going to somebody's dreams and implanting an idea into their head, and the way the film stacks its layers of dreams actually makes the film, although I will say a little more complex than most blockbusters, it makes the film easy to understand for the general audiences, unlike something like Tenet, which was just so confusing and so hard to understand that it didn't really get that investment. I think that's why this film has way more emotional investment, way more of a cultural relevance, even over a decade later versus when we got last year with Tenet. But it's not a comparison video. Getting back into the actual movie, the ensemble cast in this film is fantastic. I mean, you get Leonardo DiCaprio, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Tom Hardy in his first major role in the movie after Bronson, now Elliot Page, but at the time Ellen Page. You get Cillian Murphy, you know, just so many iconic Nolan staples. They're just all in this film and are all fantastically portrayed by the actors. The score behind this one is so one of my favorite movie scores of all time. So emotionally investing and so also exciting as well. The CGI is fantastic in the way it's able to blend practical so seamlessly. The film's so fast-paced, so entertaining. Good emotional investment with our main character trying to, you know, kind of get past the effects of his wife dying. And the whole ending of the film is also very emotionally investing in the way that I can understand why the film's ending is just so relevant even nowadays. It's just such a great action thriller, such a great emotional investing movie. It's just so great on all cylinders that I still think it's one of Nolan's best films to this day. As a film that still remains unmatched in his career, and I think it's just such a brilliant blockbuster that is a one of its kind, definitely. Number 61.
Oh, you are sick.
Eraserhead is David Lynch's first film that he made, his introduction to cinema, and what is one hell of an introduction. This film is so wild, so crazy, and just so odd. It's so creepy in ways that only Lynch can portray as a director. The black and white aesthetic that he has to this film, I think similar to like Night of the Living Dead, this came out at a time where color in film was very regular, but it adds to the film's atmosphere and just the cold, dark world that Lynch sets up in this movie that doesn't make it just feel like a pretentious art student. It's a very odd story that's simple on the surface, but it's just so odd and so weird with so many iconic visuals, like the one with the big cheeks, or, you know, the baby, or, you know, the scene, like the poster image of like Jack Palance with his weird hair, his apartment building that's like on the middle of like a train factory. It's just like so dark and so just dystopian that it's just like you can't help but like see what's gonna happen next. It's a creepy movie, really well written, really well directed, has so many iconic visuals that will just stick with you forever. It's just such a cold, dark tone to it that will just make you walk away from it. Unlike most horror films, with like a genuine like, question mark above your head, like what you just watched, but in the best way possible. It's a film that doesn't feel pretentious, but has a lot of imagery that will merit discussions in the future, which I really like. And it's just such a really investing and just such a fascinating film that I think it's a must-watch for any film fan out there at least once in their lifetime. And if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out because it's a brilliant movie that started a career of a brilliant filmmaker. Number 60.
I'm tour guide Barbie. Please keep your hands, arms, and accessories inside the car and no flash photography. Thank you.
I'm a married spud. I'm a married spud. I'm a married spud. For the single fellas.
Toy Story 2, the sequel that almost went direct to video and should have been a failure at first, but it's just Pixar has these great stories being able to come back so quickly, and the way the film's production laid out for it was almost like a success story because the film started as a direct to video sequel, and then when they actually wanted to go theatrical, the film almost got deleted entirely at the last minutes. It's just like so many aspects that could have made this film just a generic direct to video bottom of the barrel sequel turned into one of my favorite films of all time. I love this movie. And it's kind of shocking for me because this is like the one Toy Story film growing up with that I didn't really like that much. I love the original, I love the third film. But the second film growing up with it, I just didn't really appreciate that much until rewatching it for Toy Story 4 coming out a couple years back. And I really love this movie. I think it's just such a really good pace and a great addition to the first film with being able to introduce new characters and just have so many iconic main staples of the franchise like Jessie or Sticky Pete or Bullseye. Great characters in there. Splitting up the group, which many sequels do and do it very poorly, like Rise of Skywalker. This one does a great job at being able to have each side have their own story arc and have their own conclusion by the very end. Like you get Buzz Lightyear and Zurg. You get the evil Buzz Lightyear in this film that Buzz has to interact with, kind of like facing himself in the first film once again and interacting with Zurg. And then you get Woody's story, which basically he learns to accept himself and realize that he's not an antique. He doesn't need to belong to himself. He needs to be loved by an actual kid. And his arc from wanting to be with this new family almost to all of a sudden realizing like regaining his worth as a toy again, it's just so emotionally investing and just so satisfying when you get to the end of the conclusion. You get some of the saddest moments of a Pixar film, which is saying a lot. Like you get Jessie's sequence when she, her owner kind of gave up on her and just gave her away, which is so sad. Yeah, some of the best comedic moments of any Toy Story film, like the Barbie sequence. Or you get Alice Toy Barn and Rex, switching through the commercials. Just so many iconic moments and so many iconic scenes in this film that will just stick with you forever if you grew up with this movie. Really well animated, really well done in the comic standpoint, great directing, great writing. This is another Pixar film just fired on all cylinders, and it's just such a great kids movie, but also just a great film in general. And it's just one of the many reasons why Toy Story is still one of my favorite movie franchises of all time. Number 59.
Where do you get off?
Right here. Okay, folks, if you don't see me again, it's 'cause I'm dead.
Baby Driver is one of the best Edgar Wright films of his filmography, which is saying a lot, and it's a film that I just love. It has one of the best soundtracks of any film. I mean, this kind of like what based the film off of, and you can tell why this film kind of birthed out of that soundtrack, because it's just so well done. It's just a movie that not a whole lot of people were expecting from, and I didn't really have a whole lot of expectations walking into this film back like 4 years ago in the summer of 2017, and it's just such a well done movie. I mean, Edgar Wright's direction is just seamlessly flawless in this film. It's so meticulous and just so smooth with the way he handles the car chases, the way he handles dialogue scenes, the way he handles the songs being integrated into the film, the way that he's able to handle just the comedic moments. Just every single aspect of this film is just handled expertly well by an experienced filmmaker in Edgar Wright in the best way possible. The characters are all investing all throughout. You get Baby, the main character, Ansel Elgort, so his best performance by far of his career. You get John Hamm, you get Elza Gonzalez, John Berthelot's one seems fantastic. Just Jamie Foxx is great in this film. Just all of the cast in this film is just brilliant in their acting department. The car chases are some of the best I've seen in any movie. Like Fast and Furious wish they were these action sequences. The film style is just unlike any film I've seen before or since, and there's a reason for it. The color palette is fantastic, the editing's great, the directing and writing is just all top notch in this film. You just care for every single character in this film, and when stuff starts going wrong, especially in the third act, you care for both sides, but especially for Baby's side, and just makes everything just so much more exciting, investing, funny at times, sad at times. It's just it's like a smorgasbord of emotions that you just go through in this film. And if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out because it's a brilliant movie. Number 58.
Get away from her, you bitch!
James Cameron's Aliens is a brilliant sequel, and what to do with a horror franchise to go in a different direction, and really have to up the stakes in a way that doesn't negate the first film, but only elevates it. Taking this franchise into the action direction, which kind of changed the franchise forever, is able to blend the horror and the action so well seamlessly that makes the film so much more exciting and so much more intense and bigger, like you want for a sequel, but also doesn't lose this tinge of horror or atmosphere or just what made the first film work so well with Ridley Scott. James Cameron only ups the ante in this film. The Queen Alien and all the Xenomorphs we get in this film are way more terrifying than we got in the first one, which is saying a lot. All the new characters we get introduced, like Ripley returning, we get Newt as basically the surrogate daughter for Ripley. We get Lance Henriksen as the main android that, Ripley kind of has to learn to trust again, which is kind of a good carryover of Alien when she didn't trust the main robot of that first film. Being able to carry over that message and that theme, which I really liked. The action is top notch, it's so well directed and just so great. The writing is fantastic, especially for some of the most iconic lines in film history to this day. The production design is fantastic, the score is fantastic, the pacing is brilliant, the direction is top notch. Everything about this film is just so iconic, it's just so well done, and just so enthralling that, if you haven't seen this film yet, which I doubt because it's a bona fide classic, please check it out because this is what to do with a horror sequel. And it's no question why this film has remained unmatched for the remainder of this franchise. And I don't think we'll ever see a film in this franchise match the quality of these first two films, and especially this movie. Number 57.
No, I want an official red carbonation 200 jet range my laser rifle.
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
A Christmas Story is one of my favorite Christmas films of all time, and although yes, it is a little overhyped, and yes, it is a little too overspread in terms of the merchandise and the playing on TV 24 hours every single Christmas, but I still think it's a great film. I still have so many memories of doing the annual tradition of watching Christmas Story with my family every single Christmas Eve on TBS, and I still do that to this day, but this film is just so great. The comedy is timeless, the acting is great from the entire cast, there's so many great lines, so many great sequences, like the dream sequences are iconic, the Santa scene, you'll shoot your eye out, kid, great stuff, the tongue on the pole is great, eating at the Chinese restaurant on Christmas morning, just so many great things like the leg lamp, just so many great moments in this film that just remained unmatched that I've seen from any other Christmas film in my opinion. The atmosphere of Christmas is still one of the best I've seen from any Christmas film. It really does ooze the holiday in the best way possible. It doesn't feel pretentious or member berries. The writing's fantastic, the directing's brilliant, the score is fantastic, the production design of this film is fantastic as well, making it feel like the 40s, and I constantly keep forgetting this is a period piece because the film just feels so natural in the time period. What can I say about this film that hasn't already been said about it before? It is a bona fide classic. It's a great story about how this film was basically bombed at the box office and became nothing for years until it aired on TBS, and now it's become this huge cultural phenomenon. It's a great movie, it's a great coming of age film, it's a great Christmas film. It's just a great film on all cylinders, and I truly do love this movie, and I will continue to watch this film on CBS for the remainder of my life on Christmas Eve. Number 56. Snowpiercer is another great film by the amazing director Bong Joon-ho. This is my first film that I watched of his before Parasite really knocked it out of the park and really made him a household name in the film industry. And you can see why he became such a iconic director, not only from Parasite but also many other films, and this is one of them. And this was really, I think, his first big introduction to the American market as in terms of filmmaking. Having a big star like Chris Evans, you also have Octavia Spencer, Ed Harris, Tilda Swinton, who's great as always, especially her makeup. She's always just able to play characters so well, and this won't be the last time we talk about her on this list, but just the cast is fantastic in this movie. The whole concept about this post-apocalyptic world where the majority of the human population left are just stuck on this train just going non-stop and to nowhere, no destination, and there's some rich people who are at the front of the train, and then basically the majority of the population are stuck at the back of the train and are just given bricks of little food bars to eat, and are just given shit conditions and decide to take a stand. Not the most complex story in the world at its face value, but there's so much more underneath the surface if you're talking about social classes, economic classes, and the rise and fall of the people on this train is just so investing to see. And the acting's fantastic, the writing's brilliant, the directing is amazing, the action sequences are amazing as well. Like, once again, foreign films just know how to do action better than us Americans, and this film proves it. And they're able to blend in the stylistic choices of being set on this train, all the clothes they get, the production design team, the costume design is just brilliant, and it's bring this gritty action to it. I don't know, I love this movie. It's just so intense, so enthralling, great emotional story that it gives you a decent amount of twists and turns as you go through the movie, then keeps you invested, keeps you enthralled about what's going to happen next. And I think it's just a great movie, and yeah, it's brilliant. Number 55. Climax is an anxiety-ridden nightmare fuel by the amazing Gaspar Noé. This was actually the first time I watched of his career. I watched it about a year ago, building up to Halloween, and I was floored by how amazing this film was. I heard good things about it before I watched it, but I didn't realize what I was getting into when I finally hit the play button, and it is an insane nightmare fuel that will just haunt you forever, but it is so visually striking. The performances are great. You get Sofia Boutella in here, you get a couple other named actors, but for the most part, it's mainly just a bunch of unknown French dancers who do their job amazingly well. Like, for many first-time actors in this movie, they give more, emotional performances that you see than many of the big stars you see on Netflix films or even some Hollywood blockbusters nowadays. The dance sequences are amazing. I mean, the film starts out with like a 10-minute dance sequence alone, and that just starts the movie. And the whole location being set in this one house, again, I told you, I like movies that are isolated or only set in one location over the course of like a night or two. And this film takes place over the course of a few hours, and it feels like one whole experience. It doesn't feel like a movie. It more or less feels like you're watching people just unravel in the madness. And just the film just takes so many twists and turns that you don't see coming. There's so much visually just disturbing images that take place that will just haunt you forever. The film is not afraid to go dark and grisly and really show the dark side of humanity when they're under certain substances. And some of the train spotting, it just makes you not want to take drugs forever. I mean, yeah, people talk about Requiem for a Dream. I think this is way more disturbing than Requiem for a Dream, in my opinion. Just the soundtrack is also amazing too. A lot of EDM music in here, which I think Gaspar uses amazingly. His signature style that you see, like how he starts with the credits and then he'll have random title sequences, which at first seem pretentious, but I think they just fit the craziness and just the absurdness of how this film operates. It's a brilliant movie. I just had a complete blast with it, just having just this emotional roller coaster ride of just seeing just weird ass shit happen for 90 to 100 minutes. And if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. Number 54.
Please, God.
This is God.
Wes Craven's original Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the quintessential slashers of the 80s, and by far probably the most creative slasher film that's ever been made. I mean, yes, we do like slashers like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, and there's many other slashers we've seen like that, of that nature, but I think Freddy Krueger, by the creation of Wes Craven, this dream being brought to life, not only by him but also Robert Englund's incredible performance, made a slasher icon that I think will forever be probably the most terrifying slasher if you ever encounter, just because of the base concept of a killer that can haunt you and kill you in your dreams. The fact that, unlike most other slashers that we see, you can run away from them at some point. Like, there's some way to defeat it, but with Freddy Krueger, there's no escape. You cannot outrun him, and that's a terrifying concept within itself. Beyond that, the visual imagery in this film is just amazing. There's so many iconic shots that will just stick with you, and have stuck with pop culture for decades at this point. I mean, the iconic scene that opens up the film with the main girl that you think is kind of similar, like the Drew Barrymore type in Scream, where you think she's the main character but she actually isn't, where she gets like dragged up the ceiling and just gets her chest rubbed up by Freddy, or whenever you get the scene with Johnny Depp and he falls down this giant hole in his bed and just a blood vacuum just pours out of his bed, or seeing Freddy cough his fingers and go, "This is God." Just so many iconic shots and scenes in this film that Robert Englund portrays so effectively, and why I personally prefer a lot more scary, dark Freddy that we got in the first two films and so on in the third film versus the kind of comedic Freddy we got for the rest of the franchise, minus New Nightmare. It's just this icon is so enthralling, just so interesting. The main characters we get from like Nancy and her friends, I think, are very well done, and I think they're very likable. Just the dialogue is great. Wes Craven's setup of the scares is just really meticulous and very well paced, and how they build up this world is just very well done, and it's just so entertaining. I think it's still a slasher that holds up decades later. I don't think it's that dated. I think that it's kind of sad that we haven't gotten a Nightmare movie in over a decade at this point, but if we ever do, I hope it's almost as good, or at least like matching to the quality of this original film in some ways. Number 53.
Manners maketh man.
Kingsman: The Secret Service is another fantastic film from Matthew Vaughn. I like to talk about Kick-Ass. This guy is an incredibly stylistic director that just knows how to make a great comic book movie to life. He brings so many unique characters to the screen. He has an impressive cast this time around. Taron Egerton, his first major role, and he just steals the show in this movie. You get Colin Firth as Harry, the main mentor that trains Eggsy throughout most of the runtime. He's just brilliant. And his sequences, both action and dialogue, are just so entertaining to watch because Colin Firth just brings such a gravitas to the role that you don't expect. Mark Strong as the Alfred type, I think, is very fun. Samuel Jackson as the main villain, Valentine, with his lisp, is just so entertaining. Cynthia Botella just talked about her climax. She's also great in here, like the main henchman with her legs. Just iconic stuff. It's just an impressive cast. Get Michael Caine in here as well. Just amazing cast. Brilliant action sequences. I mean, like throughout the film, the way that Matthew Vaughn handles the camera work, the cinematography, the editing, especially the church scene we get in the third act and the final fight is just so impressive. And the way they blend the soundtrack, the score, the sound design is also great in this movie. The way they build up the world is just so investing. It's just so much fun. And personally, I prefer this kind of world to James Bond because I think it's a lot more stylistic. The R rating actually does help out the movie, in my opinion, being able to have no holds bar as for the action sequences and the dialogue sequences. It's intense, it's fun as hell, it's funny as hell when it needs to be. It can be intense, action-packed, funny, investing, good character arcs in this film as well. It's just such a great comic movie, and it really pains me to say that the sequel really sucked, in my opinion, and the prequel that we're getting later this year doesn't really seem that interesting. So, I don't know, maybe Matthew Vaughn can come back with another Kingsman film at some point, but this is still by far the best Kingsman film that we've gotten by far. Number 52.
Don't touch the butt. Nemo! He touched the butt.
Finding Nemo is one of the quintessential Pixar films that really was one of the many great films that Pixar kind of came out of the gate with back in the early 2000s when they were just on a hot streak. You know what I'm saying? This film is just brilliant. I know I've been using that term a lot, but you know, it's hard to describe anything else with a Pixar film than brilliant. It's so imaginative, so creative, just so fun and investing, and a good story about a very restrictive father, very scared of what's going to happen to his son, and learning to kind of let go of that, learning to let his son actually have a life, and really having good messages throughout the film, having great characters throughout it. You know, we get Dory in here. I think she's a really good addition. Didn't necessarily necessitate her own solo film, but I still think she's very fun in the movie. The sea turtles we get in like the one sequence I think is very fun. The characters we get when Nemo is stuck in the tank at the doctor's office, really fun. Even like small roles like the sharks who are doing like their AA meeting, or like the seagulls we get in the third act. Every single character and character design in this film just sticks out in the best way possible. The animation is still beautiful. Nearly 20 years later, I mean, the water effects are still damn near realistic, and they've only gotten better with time. The score is great. The film is very fast-paced, very funny, very emotionally heartfelt when it needs to be, like the best Pixar films do. It's just such a heartwarming movie that is just so entertaining, and it's no reason why it's still a classic nearly 20 years later. Number 51.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry? You know what? I should thank you. I think I'm finally finished with you and your son.
Rudderless is by far the most underrated film of this entire list, and probably like one of the few films I will say that I probably would say, apart from the people that have seen my underrated films video on the topic, which I'll link it in the card above, but this is a film that basically, until I heard about it through one of my main YouTube icons and Cody Leach talking about it, I heard nothing about this movie, and the majority of people, probably you watching this video, probably have never heard of this movie. And it sucks because this movie is just so underrated and so underappreciated, and it's just such a phenomenal movie. The film is basically revolving around Billy Crudup, who plays a grieving father who loses his son in a school shooting. And basically, years later, once, his life kind of unravels to where he was this successful businessman, and then you see him living like a hermit in this boat. And then he finds his son's old recordings of his songs that he used to record before he died, and basically uses it as a coping mechanism for his son's death, and teams up with the late Anton Yelchin and his mates to form a band, and basically becomes the hit of this small town. And then as things start getting revealed throughout the movie, you realize it's a lot darker than you realized. And this film is just so well done. From the music is also amazing as well. William H. Macy directed the film as his directorial debut. He wrote some of the film, wrote some of the music, and directed the movie flawlessly, in my opinion. And it sucks that he really hasn't done anything notable since in the director chair. And I think as great as he is in Shameless and so many other roles like Fargo and Boogie Nights, he is just a phenomenal director as well from this movie, and I wish he's done more stuff. I don't know, maybe we'll see what he does next, but I think this is by far one of the best directorial debuts I've ever seen from a director. The music is amazing, it's very catchy, not necessarily my style, but I like the acoustic flavor it has to it. The acting's incredible across the board. I mean, you get, despite the fact how underseen this film is, it has quite a stacked cast. You get Billy Crudup in here, who is great in the main lead. The late Anton Yelchin, rest in peace. He's great as basically kind of like the co-lead. With Billy Crudup, you get Selena Gomez in here in a small role, Lawrence Fishburne. Just great cast all around. And yeah, the music's amazing. The film leaves you on a note to where you don't really know morally where you stand upon this movie, because it actually does ask questions that are very uncomfortable. They necessitate a conversation, in the fact that there's no other film that I've seen that has actually tackled this type of subject. And I won't spoil it for those who haven't seen it, because I will bet that majority of you who are watching this right now have not seen the film, and you should. It's free on Amazon Prime. Please check it out. But the way the film really reveals this stuff and closes, I think it's very emotionally impactful, and it's still a film that sticks with me even a year plus after watching it. It's just such an incredible movie. Great music, great acting, great story. It's just such a unique film that I just wish got more recognition. And yeah, it's a brilliant movie, and please check it out if you haven't seen it. Number 50.
I like the way you die, boy.
Django Unchained is the first Tarantino film we'll be talking about on this list, and it's still one of my favorites to this day. It is an amazing film that is just so pulpy and just so filled with subtext and action and violence and, just so much substance that I just have a complete blast with this movie. Tarantino, for me, I really enjoy him as a director. He's definitely one of my favorites out there. But for me, after his first couple of films, he kind of like slid a bit for me. I like Kill Bill, I like Inglourious Bastards, but they didn't really reach the heights for me like Pulp Fiction and other films like it. And Django Unchained, I think, is by far the best film he's made post Pulp Fiction, because it's just such a ride of a movie, in my opinion. Jamie Foxx, I like him as an actor, but I think this is by far his best role, and that's saying a lot because I think he has a pretty static career. Christoph Waltz, who already won an Academy Award for teaming up with Tarantino in Inglourious Bastards. He does even better here, in my opinion. And Leonardo DiCaprio, I mean, he's an A-list actor. He's fantastic here as the villain in Colonel Candy. Like, his scene, of course, probably the most iconic scene in the film from his characters, like whenever he has that shouting match, whenever he realized he got played over by Django and his partner, and just you see the fact that he breaks the glass and his hand's actually bleeding, and he just stays in character. He's just so fun and so just such a blast to see on screen, because he's so likable, but on a snap he can just turn to the most threatening presence in the film. You also get Samuel L. Jackson here as like his main slave. He's also fantastic. You let him sleep in the penthouse. Just great acting from there as well. Constant collaborator with Tarantino. The period piece is great. The score is amazing. Really does go back to those Western tones that I think Tarantino does nail in this film. The pacing is incredible. The violence is amazing. I mean, Tarantino, he's going to get a lot of pulpy, explosive violence, but this is some of the best I think he's ever done in his career. It's incredibly entertaining, very funny when it needs to be, very snappy dialogue as always. Great acting, great writing, great directing. It's just a film that fires on all cylinders and is just an amazing movie. Number 49.
This guy here?
You know what? He just left.
Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is by far my favorite film from Edgar Wright, and I think it's just a masterpiece of filmmaking. This could have been a very forgettable, just generic teen movie, but the way that Edgar Wright handles it in such a stylistic way, by far is probably his most stylistic movie, with how it's just, you know, such translates the comic book aesthetic into the big screen like I was talking about with Matthew Vaughn. He's just able to just hammer it home into your face without feeling annoying. Like, it feels so fluid with the story because it's so absurd about this regular Joe high school that has a crush on this one girl having to fight her 7 evil exes in order to get her. It's such an absurd concept, but it's handled so well by Edgar Wright that it's just so entertaining to watch. And the entire cast is fantastic. Michael Cera, probably his best role to date. Mary Elizabeth Winstead, also probably her best role to date, at least her most well-known. Rory Culkin as Michael Cera's friend, I think is very funny. The evil exes themselves are just so great. You know, we get Chris Evans, Brandon Routh, Brie Larson, Aubrey Plaza's great, Anna Kendrick's great. It's an incredibly stacked cast that they all just know how to perform the characters in the best way possible. The action sequences are also very fun because they're just so unique and just so different from any other comic book film you've seen before or since. The soundtrack is fantastic. All the hits are bangers. This film just fires on all cylinders, and it's just a great genre piece. You get great action, you get great romance, you get great comedy, you get great dialogue and writing. All the story structure is very entertaining, and they could have been very repetitive, but they find a way to like make each and every single segment with the Evil X somewhat different from the last one. And like even when they team up at the very end, I think is also very fun. It's just such a fun movie. Like, it's such a good throw-on movie just to have a complete blast with. I love it, and you know, it's probably the main reason why I'm so hyped for Last Night in Soho. And it's my most anticipated film for the rest of the year. And that's saying a lot considering we're getting stuff like Spider-Man and stuff like that. But this is just an amazing movie, and please check it out if you haven't seen it. Number 48.
My turn. I win.
Skyfall is one of the few films that actually did get me into filmmaking. This, and along with another film we'll talk about later on this list, these are the first 2 films I saw in theaters that really made me a movie fan, that made me interested in movies beyond just this surface level stuff of entertainment value. You know, I don't know, there was something about this film when I saw the TV spots nearly a decade ago that made me want to see it. I'd never seen a James Bond film, and seeing it for the first time at 10 years old, I had no idea what the hell was going on because I didn't understand the context. Because, once again, Daniel Craig was the first Bond actor to actually have a, you know, continuity-filled saga that wasn't just a bunch of anthology segments, kind of like every other Bond before him. But still, I loved it, and even rewatching this multiple times years later, especially building up to No Time to Die, it's just gotten better and better each time I watched it. I think this is by far the best Bond film. A lot of people kind of like battle between which one is better, Casino Royale or this. I think this is better just because it holds more emotional value to me personally. But beyond that, I think the film is really good at being a dark Bond film. Similar to Casino Royale, it doesn't necessarily end on the best note. And in terms of just being a piece of how Bond is just burnt down to the ground, how his agency is kind of like just thrown away, and how Javier Bardem as the main villain is just amazing in my opinion. I think he's a fantastic actor overall. I mean, he's just great in every single role he's played, and I think this is by far his best role, which is saying a lot because, you know, a lot of people contribute No Country for Old Men. I think this is his best role to date. It has one of the best Bond songs in Adele's Skyfall. I think that the action, and Sam Mendes just knows how to create a great action set piece. I mean, I love 1917 and stuff like that, and this is like no exception to that. I think there's so many iconic scenes in this film, like whenever he's sliding down the escalator, James Bond, and the train crashes through the underground tunnels, or the final fight in this huge mansion where Bond's parents died. Just so much crazy stuff in this film that I think really helps it, and the film has the balls to actually do some very dark stuff, like kill Judi Dench's character, who has been there since GoldenEye. Very, very emotional stuff, and just the way the film ends is just so... It tells a really dark story, and I like when film and film franchises, kind of like Infinity War, are able to go dark and able to actually make the heroes lose, which I think is very interesting. It's just a fantastic Bond film, and we have yet to see another Daniel Craig Bond film to really reach the heights, and any Bond film in general for me has not been able to reach the heights of Skyfall. And I really hope that No Time to Die ends on a good note, because, you know, Daniel Craig's Bond films have been up and down, but we'll see what happens with No Time to Die. But regardless, this is still an amazing Bond film, and it's my favorite Bond film to this day. Number 47.
I've been like a father to you. Be a son to me now.
I have a father. His name was Ben Parker.
Sam Raimi's Spider-Man may be outdated in some aspects, but I still think it's a phenomenal superhero film and one of the mainstays of why we're getting in the superhero craze nearly 20 years later. It's an impeccable movie that I think really defined the times and really showed that you can do so much more with a superhero movie, especially with the big budget aspects. But still what makes this film great is the fact that Sam Raimi is able to interact his actual aspects as a filmmaker from Evil Dead into this film. It's not just a generic superhero film that we've seen so much from the Marvel machine in the past few years. Though he's able to use camera shots and actually have some really good horror elements in this film, being able to be brutal, especially with the final fight between Green Goblin and Spider-Man, I think is still one of my favorite final fights in any movie because it's just how brutal it is. I think the film sets up this world very uniquely in the way that it does feel like a comic book come to life. It feels lively, it feels energetic, it feels, unlike our world in some aspects, which I do like. I think that the main lead in Tobey Maguire, I still think he's my favorite Spider-Man personally because he just feels the most like a goofy Peter Parker. Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland, I think they're both good in their roles, but I felt like they were just kind of too clean cut for their characters. I feel like Tobey Maguire, despite the fact you can throw the jokes at him that he cries a lot and that he was like 26 when he was playing a high school senior, I still think he just brings the essence of Peter Parker, the awkwardness of Peter Parker, the best out of the three Spider-Men that we've gotten. I think his relationship with Mary Jane Watson, I also think is very good. Kristen Dunst is an amazing actress, and I think this is kind of the role that kind of really brought her to the limelight after Interview with a Vampire. James Franco's great as Harry. Willem Dafoe's amazing as Norman Osborn. And just an amazing cast. I mean, you get Rosemary Harris as Aunt May, Uncle Ben, the late Cliff Robertson. I think he's just phenomenal. There's a reason why that we haven't gotten Uncle Ben in the MCU because there's just no way you can top what Cliff Robertson did. The action's amazing. I love the suit. I love the score by Danny Elfman. I love just everything about this one. Just so much fun and just so lively and just so entertaining, while also not afraid to be dark and also afraid to show character development for Peter Parker. I don't know. It's just so fun, so energetic, so lively that I can't help but love it. I understand if it's outdated in some aspects, kind of like the CGI and stuff like that, but I still love it for the goofy nature that it is. And there's no other Spider-Man film like it. Even the sequels have more of a big budget flavor to them. And this film just I don't know, it has its own little time capsule to it. I love this movie and just, I don't know. We'll see what happens with No Way Home and see what they do with Tobey Maguire, but he's my favorite Spider-Man. Number 46.
This is not a place for a priest, Father. You shouldn't be here.
We might need to work on your sales pitch, son. The El Royale, no place for a priest.
Bad Times at the El Royale is once again another underrated film that is really criminally underseen. I just talked about this with underrated films like a little less than a month ago, and I think that, I don't know, I just don't understand why this film is just so underseen. Once again, like Rudderless, as an amazing cast, even more stacked than Rudderless. I mean, you get Chris Hemsworth, Dakota Johnson, John Hamm, Jeff Bridges, Cynthia Erivo. You get, in one scene, you do get Nick Offerman. Just an incredible cast. And the way that Drew Goddard directs this film and also writes the film, who wrote Cabin in the Woods, he does a great job of like that film, being able to subvert your expectations, being able to throw a twist and turn at every single moment, and being able to just be such a roller coaster ride of emotions. You're able to have a complete blast with the characters because the film gives you time to actually spend time with these characters and live this world and really kind of explore what the film is like and how these characters interact with one another. But when stuff starts going wrong, when stuff starts going bad, it really, makes it intense because the film set up time and set up these characters to where you actually genuinely care about these characters making out of the situation alive. The acting's phenomenal for the entire cast. The directing and writing is amazing. I love the period piece aesthetic of this being set in 1969 and not kind of throwing it into your face. Yes, there is a great soundtrack. Yes, there are a couple of references like Nixon and stuff like that. But for the most part, the film just has this time bottle feel to it that I just love. The film is just so entertaining. It's a really fast-paced film for a 2.5-hour movie because the film is just so entertaining. The film's very creatively shot and the cinematography used is just impeccable. And seeing this in theaters was one of my favorite movie theater experiences of my life. It's just a shame this film bombed at the box office, and I think that, there's just so much untapped potential with Drew Goddard as a filmmaker that I hope that someone gives him the chance to direct another movie because this film is just amazing. And I think it's by far his best film to date, and it's just an amazing movie, and one of the best films I've seen in the 21st century. Number 45.
Agent! Rocky!
Hey, where's your hat?
I love you!
I love you.
I love you! I love you!
Rocky is an amazing sports drama, probably my favorite sports drama of all time to this day. As great as Creed is, it still doesn't hold a candle to Rocky, the original film that started it all. This is just an amazing, simple story about this one just regular Joe wanting to go to distance, wanting to see if he can really stand toe-to-toe with Apollo Creed. This, huge, iconic boxer that's like, doing all these talk shows and all this stuff. And just seeing like this really inspiring story about this just one random Philadelphia guy just being able to go toe-to-toe with this huge, larger-than-life character in Apollo Creed. It's just so inspiring, just enthralling, and just so well done, especially when you know the real life story about how Sylvester Stallone was basically homeless when he was just like, throwing the script around trying to get it funded. It's just really, really inspiring. Sly himself in his main titular role that basically kind of instigated his career. He's amazing here. Everyone else in the cast is great. Carl Weathers as Creed is a fantastic. Adrian's great. Paulie's great. The whole crew that we see in this film set up is just amazing. The world is just so well realized, just so realistic, and just feels so emotional that you just love everything about it. The score by Bo Conti is amazing. The boxing sequences are great, and really do keep you on the edge of your seat because you don't know what's going to happen next, and just instigate such an amazing franchise that I still love to this day. And I think as many great franchises as Sly's been part of, this is by far his best one in my opinion, and one that I truly do hold dear to my heart. It's an amazing film, and it's still a timeless classic nearly 50 years later. Number 44.
You okay?
Fine.
Say, that's a nice bike.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day is an impeccable sequel. This is the top tier when it comes to movie franchise sequels. This was a film that years after the first film, and this is at a point where Schwarzenegger and Cameron had done many different projects. Cameron was already doing stuff like The Abyss, and Schwarzenegger was really starting to do stuff like Kindergarten Cop, and he was really starting to become larger than life after he did stuff like Red Heat and like other movies like it that really instigated him to a big stardom, like Predator and Commando and stuff like that. But this film is still just an iconic piece of cinema. It is so intense and so entertaining. Being able to contain a story, and somewhere like Aliens, being able to take this horror-grounded franchise at first and really bump it up to action while not losing a shred of intensity and suspense, especially with the incredible villain in the T-1000 played by the amazing Robert Patrick, who's kind of sad that he really hadn't done much in his career beyond that was really noteworthy, because he's a great villain in this. He's able to be so charismatic and just so non-assuming at first, hey, that's a nice bike, and turning into this unstoppable threat that still to this day is the most terrifying villain in the Terminator franchise. You couldn't have gotten more terrifying than this liquid metal hybrid, this monstrosity in the T-1000. Bringing back Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, her becoming a badass, feels completely earned and fits with the characters like Ripley and Aliens. Edward Furlong as John Connor was an incredible actor that sadly past this movie really hadn't done anything really noteworthy, which sucks because he's great in this movie. The score is great, the way he continues the story, and basically just caps out the franchise in a great way. I think this franchise should have stopped with this film. Like many other people, I don't really care for many of the sequels. I kind of like Terminator Salvation. I kind of like Genesis for how dumb fun it is, but no sequel in this franchise has been able to top or continue the story in a meaningful way past Terminator 2 Judgment Day. It's a great sequel that combines great action scenes, great story, great characters, great good practical sci-fi effects that blend with the CGI very well. And I think more than Jurassic Park, it still ages beautifully. There's not one single shot of bad CGI in this film, and it's really awe-inspiring to see because it came out in the early 90s, and even films that have just come out last year age worse than this movie, and it's so weird. But yeah, it's an impeccable sequel. I love it, and there's a big reason why it's an all-time classic. Number 43.
You better lawyer up, asshole, because I'm not coming back for 30%. I'm coming back for everything.
David Fincher and Aaron Sorkin's The Social Network is an amazing biopic. And I'm not necessarily a big fan of the biopic genre, but the way that Aaron Sorkin and David Fincher direct and write this movie together is just amazing. Granted, not everything about this movie is really realistic, according to Mark Zuckerberg, which I don't know to trust that or not, but you can definitely see some dramatization in this film, but it's just so well done to well utilize and make the film that's just simply about a guy just creating a social media app that was originally a dating site at first, and just kind of spiraling to this madness about betrayal and, madness and greed, and doing it in the best way possible. The performances across this film are fantastic. Jesse Eisenberg, this is still his best role by spades in his career. Andrew Garfield, this was his big introduction into the Hollywood, and he's just incredible in this film. Justin Timberlake, way better than you would expect for a pop star breaking into the film world. There's so many great other actors and little cameos in here that you just recognize as well. The score by Trevor Reznor and Atticus Ross, still one of my favorite movie scores of all time. Just great stuff in here. Great effects in here. Some great dialogue sequences that are just so intense and so amazing that I love it. Just great story, great pacing, great characters that you love to hate sometimes. Fantastic score, fantastic cinematography as well, making the film feel very muted and very isolated as the film progresses. It's just a great film, and still one of my favorite biopics to this day. Number 42. John Carpenter's original 1970 Halloween is still one of the best horror films ever made. Similar to what I was talking about with Nightmare on Elm Street, taking a very simple concept in this slasher icon of Michael Myers, who just kind of kills because evil, which sounds very interesting at first, but the thing about that makes this shape, this original incarnation of Michael Myers, so terrifying that even in this new rendition of the Halloween franchise that they can't seem to capture is the fact that Michael Myers is truly a soulless villain. He's not really driven by a motivation in this original film, which kind of is dampened by the sequels. And, he's just not this... He toes the line between human and supernatural so well that you don't know how to take it. He's a guy that, on a surface, seems like a generic serial killer. But the way that John Carpenter directs it with such a ambiance to him, and just such a gravitas nature to Michael Myers and the world that is created in Haddonfield, it's just so unique, and that's why he's still a slasher icon 40 plus years later, and that's why we're still continuing on with this franchise. Great director John Carpenter, amazing score by him as well in the writing chair. Him and Deborah Hill are just amazing writers as well. And I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of John Carpenter, but I think this is by far his best work in my opinion. Just the atmosphere, the low budgetness actually adds to the flavor in this film. It actually makes it feel more engaging as a result. I think the acting is great across the board. Jamie Lee Curtis, her first major role in the film world, and she does not miss a single beat. It's no wonder why she became a huge actress and did so many roles beyond Laurie Strode. Just great actors. The kills are not the most gore that you expect for the later sequels, but they're still very effective. I mean, there's still the iconic shot of Michael Myers, tilting his head after he stabs the one guy in the chest in the doorway. Great stuff like that. It ends on a note to where it just leaves you with chills on your spine. And honestly, if it ended off being just a original movie and not had any sequels and created a franchise, it still would have been more terrifying. It's probably the most terrifying thing about Michael Myers, just the fact that his breathing and the fact that he's just so able to toe that line between human and supernatural so well. And Donald Pleasance as well, coming to here as Dr. Loomis, it's just an iconic character, and his speeches are just so amazing. It's just so haunting that make Michael Myers even more of a threat in this film. It's just an amazing film, and it's no wonder why it's still a classic nearly, over 40 years later. Number 41.
Going back means I'll have to face my past. I've been running from it for so long. Ow! Jeez, what was that for?
It doesn't matter. It's in the past.
The original Lion King is still by far probably my favorite Disney film of all time. It is just such an amazing masterpiece. I'm not necessarily a big fan of Disney, but this film I truly do love. It's such an epic story about, this son that has to take over the father's throne after he got betrayed by his brother. And it's just such an epic tale of family and falling and rising and having to come back to reclaim what is yours, and just such an epic scale to it that makes it feel much more than a generic Disney, fare that we've gotten so long, even before this and after this, that it's not just about musicals, not just about selling merchandise, it's not just about creating cute characters put on the screen. This feels like a very adult story that can be told through a kid's perspective. Kids can watch it, but it's not necessarily it doesn't dumb down the story to be for kids. It's very mature in the way that even characters like Rafiki, which seem very goofy on the surface, are very mature when you really get to what they really stand for, what they really teach about in their messages. The film is beautifully animated, has an amazing score, just impeccable animation, great pacing, amazing characters from Simba to Mufasa to Tama Rafiki, and just so many great. Scar's an amazing villain. The voice cast is just amazing for Matthew Broderick, Jeremy Irons, James Earl Jones. No wonder why they got him back to do the remake, which is far inferior. Just incredible voice cast, amazing animation, so many iconic shots when you see Simba looking at the huge cliff and the hyenas are just like falling down that cliff, and the Pride Rock and just all the animals circling around it. It's just so many iconic shots in this film that make it feel way more grandeur in scale than if this was just something like I don't want to say Aladdin, but like other Disney fare like Snow White or like Cinderella that feel very small scale other than this, which is so just grandeur and just so epic in scale. I love this film, and it's still by far my favorite Disney movie, and it sucks that the remake really did an injustice towards this film, but I still love the original either way. Number 40.
Motherfucker! You hit me in the ear!
Well, Jesus, I'm sorry.
Ow! Christ! By the ear, man!
I fucked it up.
No, that was perfect. Oh!
Okay, how do I talk about this? Let's get on to the next one. You know why I can't talk about it. Number 39.
I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living, or get busy dying.
The Shawshank Redemption is an amazing film by the amazing Frank Darabont, and a director that kind of started on top of Drew Goddard. Is a filmmaker that really hasn't done a whole lot beyond this film. He did The Green Mile, he did The Mist, a few other Stephen King adaptations. He created The Walking Dead show, but ever since then he's been kind of off the radar, which kind of like confuses me because he's such an amazing filmmaker. And it kind of confuses me because the guy is just so good at just making you cry like there are 100 chefs in the room cutting onions right into your eyes. This is an amazing movie, and by far the tip of the iceberg is in terms of his filmmaking and directing style. The film is so well being methodically paced and letting you really live through this guy's life, and Tim Robbins, who's falsely accused of murder, and then he's just thrown into this prison for 20 plus years, and learning to grow and to appreciate all these different characters we get, like the guards by the main one played by Clancy Brown, who's an amazing actor in many different roles, both voice acting and physical acting, and he's just incredible in this film. Of course, Morgan Freeman as his co-star is incredible as well. So many great dialogue scenes, so much great world building, and really fleshing out each and every single prisoner in this prison and the prison itself, and just everything about this movie, and the way that the film wraps up as well, and the way the film pulls its twists and turns. It's just so satisfying to see, and by the way the film ends, you just put a smile on your face, and you're just like, man, that was a fantastic film. This is one of those films that were so hyped for me that I was afraid I was going to not really like it as much, but it's still a fantastic movie. It still met my expectations because this film just connects the best parts of human emotion and human interaction. They just love to be around these characters. The acting is amazing, the writing's phenomenal, the directing is stellar, the editing's fantastic, the sound design and production design, so many iconic shots. It's just an incredible film, and it's still a film that I understand why it's still a classic almost 30 years later. Number 38.
Honey!
What?
Where's my super suit?
What?
Where is my super suit?
The Incredibles is an amazing movie by the incredible Brad Bird. He's done stuff like Ratatouille and Iron Giant, and of course Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. And it kind of sucks that he hasn't really done many good films in the past few years, like with Tomorrowland and Incredibles 2, but we'll talk about that later. As per usual for Pixar, you get an incredible voice cast, incredible animation, great score by Michael Giacchino, great characters from the main Incredibles family himself. Like you get Mr. Incredible, who's basically like this guy who just reams for his past days. He wants to revisit his glory days, and in a pursuit of getting that, he decides to team up and kind of lie to his wife about it. And, he comes in contact with many of his past demons, especially Syndrome, who's an amazing villain. He's still one of my favorite villains in any film. He's just so charming and just so menacing and just so likable to be on screen that you just can't help but love him. Great other side villains like the Underminer. You get side heroes like Samuel Jackson and Frozone. Great stuff like there. Where's my super suit? Yeah, just so fast paced, so entertaining, but also does allow the film to also have moments to really take in and really have its good messages about, you know, what's more important, you know, you or your family, and being able to kind of move on from that and being able to become more than just a generic superhero. I don't know, this film is just so great, so entertaining, so funny, being able to balance out the laughs with the emotion just so well, so fast paced, so entertaining, and it's just, it does really pain me to my core that the sequel really didn't do this film justice, but maybe with a third film he could redeem himself and Brad Bird. But great movie overall, great film, standalone. I just love this movie to death, and it's still one of the best Pixar films to date. Number 37.
Look at us. Here we are. We are in, you know, the Garden of Eden, and we can't stop fighting.
I don't think there's one natural human state. The human state is multiple. I mean, if that's what you see when you're watching the girls play, that means you're depressed.
Before Midnight is by far the best film Richard Linklater has done, which is saying a lot because he's an amazing filmmaker, even outside this list, like School of Rock and the previous two Before films, but I love Before Midnight. This is a film that I watched for the first time like a few years ago when I bought the Criterion set for Christmas. And getting to this third film, like, I wasn't a huge fan of Before Sunset. I do like the movie, but it felt very, like, I liked the fact it took place in real time, but it felt kind of light on plot. And with this film, it's also not very plot driven, but the fact that the film is so much more mature and really just opens up your eyes to a lot of stuff, because the first two films are more or less about this romance blossoming, and this film is more or less about this romance kind of being tested, being like the longevity of it. Will it survive this one night and this huge outburst? And it's fight that kind of takes over the course of this runtime, over the course of this night, and it makes it feel way more emotionally investing than you would realize. And just the acting from Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy is just impeccable in this film. They're just both flawless. They also got the other minor side roles in here, which are also very well done. The cinematography in this film is also beautiful. I love the locations that are set in this movie. Richard Linklater's writing and directing is also stellar in this film. Just being able to really develop these characters over the course of decades and making them feel realistic, and the fact that they change some, but they're also still the same at the very core with their characters. I think the fight scenes and the dialogue are really what makes this film special, because they are so investing, they are so realistic, and they are so... They make you question both sides. You know, no one's in the right in this movie all the time. There's moments where you like Ethan Hawke more than Julie Delpy and vice versa, and that's what makes the film so investing. And by the end, it's just so sweet and makes you realize about, you know, romance and human relationships, and just makes it way more... It sticks with you a lot more than you expect from most romance movies, but it's just so great. And if we ever do get a fourth Before movie, I would love to see that, because it's, you know, 9 years every single time these movies have come out. But if we don't get another Before film, this is a fantastic final chapter to end this trilogy on. Number 36.
Hand her over!
Of course!
Easy now!
Butterfingers.
Spider-Man 2 is what the best comic films really do succeed at. This is an amazing movie. I personally do love it. I think it's the best of the Sam Raimi trilogy, which is kind of a popular opinion, but this film just does so many things I do love about the first film, and just elevates it in spades. The acting is, of course, amazing, and the fact that the film really does take its time to really explore Peter Parker and kind of talk about with Before Midnight, being able to really focus on our characters and their darker sides. They're not perfect all the time, and their emotional core. And throughout this film, Peter Parker's wondering if he should be Spider-Man. Was this a good choice for him? Should he be this character, even though he's suffering because of it? I don't know. I think it's an amazing movie because it really does show the downfall and the rise of Spider-Man once again. And it's just so much more investing, especially when he puts back on that suit in the third act and he goes to fight Doc Ock, which Alfred Molina is an amazing villain. I'm so glad he's coming back for No Way Home, because he's just so entertaining and he's so much fun that I wish I saw him in more stuff. He was kind of promising in one recently, but I haven't seen him in a lot of stuff, and this is by far his best role. The action sequences are also top-notch. I mean, the train sequence alone should give this movie 5 stars. Danny Elfman's score is also fantastic. The way that the film also elevates and, you know, develops the other side characters like Harry and Mary Jane. You also get Doc Ock and his wife and his emotional redemption by the end. Just so much great stuff in this film that makes it just such an amazing chapter in this movie. It doesn't feel like just a second chapter of a trilogy. It doesn't feel like it's a placeholder movie for a third film. It feels like its own standalone film that cares what made the first film work and just only develops it even more. And you can really feel the polish that's put on this film, because Sam Raimi, there are kind of some jagged edges with the first Spider-Man film that really are kind of ironed out with the sequel. And I really wish that they had a fully formed trilogy, but studio Sony really didn't care about that. But regardless, this film's amazing. I love it, and I can't wait to see how this film continues on with No Way Home, but we'll see what happens. Number 35.
Tony! Where's my daughter?
Prisoners is a very, very disturbing movie. The first one, Denis Villeneuve, on this list, and this is by far my favorite film from him. I think that with how much grandeur, blockbuster type stuff he's done as a filmmaker, he's also done some dramatic stuff as well, like Sicario, but for me, this is by far his best work to date. I love this movie to death. I think it's an incredible story that's handled well by the amazing actors. I mean, Hugh Jackman in this film, I think, is by far his best performance. And that's saying a lot because I love him as Wolverine. But in this film, he's just so terrifying and just so menacing as his grieving father, just trying to find his daughter. And Jake Gyllenhaal being this main detective, just trying to hunt down this case. Terrence Howard's also great as like the other dad, trying to find where his kid is, and just all the other side roles are also fantastic. The film's atmosphere is just so dark and cold and empty, and you can feel the despair in this world that's just elevated so well by Denis Villeneuve's direction and writing. And the fact that he came out with this and Enemy in the same year is just impeccable. I mean, he's an amazing filmmaker. The score is great, the cinematography is also fantastic at just being able to make you feel like you're one of the characters in the situation, and just being able to have just enough stuff in here that, like, with still shots and camera moves that where it doesn't distract from the film itself, and it makes you feel like you're one of these people. Paul Dano is also fantastic as the main guy who's suspected of kidnapping these two girls, and he's just, you feel so bad for him at the runtime, like how much Hugh Jackman tortures him. Just great stuff in this movie. It's a great mystery, and by the end, it just makes you appreciate Denis Villeneuve's director so much more, and just, it's an incredible movie throughout all spades, and just, yeah, we'll see what Dune does, but I think this is going to be forever my favorite Denis Villeneuve movie. Number 34.
Batman must take off his mask and turn himself in. Oh, and every day he doesn't, people will die. Starting tonight. I'm a man of my word.
The Dark Knight. I mean, this is an amazing movie. I mean, there's no, like, what can I say about this film that hasn't already been said about it? It is an impeccable movie. It is amazing. It is spectacular in the best way possible. Yes, there are a couple of issues with this film, but for me, I kind of iron them out because I think the greatness of this film overshadows all the little flaws it has with it. I think that you all know why this film is fantastic. I mean, Christopher Nolan, he's an amazing filmmaker. This is my favorite film from him as a director. Score is fantastic. The acting's amazing. I mean, Heath Ledger, the amazing Heath Ledger, may he rest in peace. Amazing as a Joker, by far my favorite iteration of the character. Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman, Maggie Gyllenhaal as the replacement for Rachel Dawes, still great. Aaron Eckhart, incredibly underrated actor, by the way. He's great as Two-Face. Just incredible cast all around, just A-listers across the board. Amazing action set pieces, amazing practical effects used with the action set pieces. Great story that develops over the course of Batman Begins and just only expands the universe further. Being able to really have these themes about, chaos, and really just showing the downfall of Gotham, and really just showing Batman sacrifices to keep this world safe, keep the city safe from the revelations of people like Two-Face and Joker. There's just so much iconic stuff in this film that makes you intense. It's able to have this gravitas to it where nothing feels safe, no character feels safe. It doesn't feel like a comic book movie. It doesn't feel like a generic throwaway, oh, this is entertaining for 90 minutes, I'll just watch this and just like watch something else. No, this is a film that really does need your attention with every single second and just holds it so well in spades. It's just an amazing movie that's so prestigiously held by Christopher Nolan, and it's a film that I don't think will be unmatched. I think it's a film that will not be matched with any other film in his career, which is saying a lot because I've already talked about a couple of his movies on this list, but it's just, he's an amazing filmmaker. He's great, and this film is the apex of his career. Number 33.
Why are you wearing that stupid bunny suit?
Stupid man suit.
Donnie Darko. This is a one strange movie. This is so weird and out there and off kilter, but I love it. I love time travel movies. I like sci-fi horror films, and this film kind of combines all of that into one strange fever dream that is Donnie Darko. This kind of like made me pay attention to Jake Gyllenhaal. This is his first major movie that he appeared in. I would say that, granted his dramatic side, I mean, he did Bubble Boy and other stuff before this, but this really elevate him to a different level of acting. He's just an incredible hero. It's just this really strange kid that's kind of thrown to an end of the world scenario. And the film does a great job at not necessarily kind of spelling out what the motivations are. Nothing about this film is not really ironed out or necessarily explained, which feels very pretentious on the surface, but it makes the film so much more emotionally investing, and it's just so much more, need for discussion afterwards. And that's what I love about movies like this that necessitate a discussion and your theories and your explanation of what it means to you. That's what I love about movies like this. I think the score is fantastic. I think the rest of the cast is also fantastic. You get, Patrick Swayze, rest in peace. He plays one of the creepiest characters in his entire career. Drew Barrymore. You even get Seth Rogen here in a very weird cameo, but I still think he's good in the movie. Of course, Frank the Bunny, iconic image, and I think that the actor that portrays him is also very, very creepy, and just the design itself is just very odd and strange. The film is just, it doesn't feel like any other film that I've ever seen in my life, before or since, and that's what makes the film so unique and so just amazing in my opinion. I love this movie. I think that it's an incredible movie across all directions, but whatever you look at this from a time travel movie to a end of the world movie or a tragedy story, it's all just handled very well by the acting. It blends genres very well. It's so creepy. It's very investing. It's a fantastic film, and I love it.
Number 32.
We lost Doug.
What?
We can't find Doug.
What are you saying, Phil? We're getting married in 5 hours.
Yeah. That's not gonna happen.
The Hangover, a very simple concept I think is handled expertly well by Todd Phillips. Even though Joker's an amazing movie, I still think this is by far my favorite film from him. Yes, the sequels do suck, which don't tarnish this first film, because I think you can ignore the sequels and just look at this as a standalone movie. I mean, I talked about with The Incredibles, right? But I love this movie. I understand that people probably give me shit for putting it higher than stuff like The Dark Knight, but I love this movie. I just rewatched it with my family when I was on vacation a couple weeks ago, and I still love this movie. This is actually the first R-rated film I ever watched. I actually have a really funny story that back in like 3rd grade, one of my dad's good friends from Tennessee came into town, and because of his he kind of attracted my parents, he allowed me to watch the film on TBS when it was on TV, and I was just so amazed with how much like raunchy stuff is in this film that really kind of stuck with me, and that's why I still kind of love it even this decades later, just because it just stuck with me. I think the jokes in the film are hilarious. I think that the acting across the board is fantastic. I mean, you get Bradley Cooper, Ed Helms, Zach Galifianakis. All of them were on the peak right before they became huge stars, and they're all great in this film. King John, even him I really enjoy. I'm not a big fan of him as an actor or the character in the sequels, but I think he is funny enough in this film when he's utilized very well. I think the score is fantastic. I think that the soundtrack is also very funny. The way that the film portrays the story and the way the film reveals his revelations, I think also very clever and very funny, and still get me every single time I watch it. The film's hilarious when it needs to be, and that's pretty much the main core of the film that makes it work. I think it's a really good story that shouldn't not necessitated a trilogy, but I think for this one film, I think it handles this story perfectly and the characters flawlessly to where I walk away from each time watching it just laughing my ass off. It's a funny comedy, and that's what it needed to do, and it just gives me so much more than that, and I love it for that.
Number 31.
Everybody be cool. You be cool.
From Dusk Till Dawn, what one hell of a movie. This is so out there and so strange. But I mean, it's Robert Rodriguez and Tarantino at their finest, and it's just so much fun. I remember watching this for the first time like 5 years ago for Halloween, and I was just so blown away by how crazy this film is. It's a great story about these two criminals who are brothers who are just going down to Mexico to try to escape the authorities in America, and then just across this one night when they have to wait for this this dealer to get them, they have to stay at this one bar, the Titty Twister, and then just hell unleashes in this film. It's so surprising that coming off the guard the first time with the vampire introduction, that's just so strange, but it just fits so well with the movie. The dialogue in this film is amazing. I mean, Tarantino wrote the film himself, and you can definitely tell. Especially the opening sequence, I think, is the best part of the entire movie, when he's like, with George Clooney and Tarantino are like robbing this gas station, like looking out for the sheriff. Amazing stuff right out of the gate. Soundtrack is amazing. I love so many tracks in this movie. I love the practical effects used on the vampires. Salma Hayek's dance sequence, I mean, it's one of the sexiest sequences ever to put the film. I think that the rest of the cast is also fantastic. You get Harvey Keitel as a pastor with the crisis of faith, Juliette Lewis as his daughter, and also get another, I forgot the actor's name who plays his son, but it was very well done in the movie. And they all basically have to come together to fight these vampire army, and he's just so much fun. You also get like side roles of Danny Trejo or Tom Savini with his Kakagun. It's so weird. It's just so entertaining, so much fun. The characters are great. I love the soundtrack. I love the directing from Robert Rodriguez. It's just so insane and fun and wild that I got to watch this every single Halloween because it's an amazing movie.
Number 30.
Evil Dead 2 is one weird movie, but honestly, I love it. A lot more than I think a lot of people do. I mean, a lot of people consider this to be the best of the Evil Dead franchise, and I definitely agree with that, but there's just something about this film that's just like, kind of like the first film, it's just so inspiring. The fact that they had, the crew that made this film, Sam Raimi, Robert Tapert, Bruce Campbell, they had a little bit more money than the first film, but not by a whole lot. And the fact they still made a fantastic horror sequel that was just bonkers by a landmark more than the first film, with more practical effects, more gore, making Ash basically a huge main staple of the horror genre more than the first one, where he's basically just kind of like the main character just because he's like the last one alive. But yeah, he's Bruce Campbell in this film is just absolutely wild. I love his take on Ash. I think it's the best take on Ash that I've seen him. I mean, I like Army of Darkness. I've not seen the show that he starred in for 3 seasons, but I love Ash in this movie. I think it's fantastic. The chainsaw arm, groovy. Him finding his hand, him talking to the furniture, and he's just going insane. There's everything involving Ash. I think is just really fun. The side characters, they're good. They're good accomplices to the story. The gore's great. The story's very simple but a lot of fun. Takes a lot of action elements in this film and definitely elevates the movie more than just being a generic horror sequel. There's just so much going on in this film that I think is a lot of fun. It's exciting, it's enthralling, it's very entertaining, very well written for a low-budget horror sequel. One of the best of its kind, in my opinion. And just endlessly rewatchable. It's just such a fun ride that I just can't help but like have a good time and a big smile on my face every time I watch it. It's a great movie, and I have a blast with it.
Number 29.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Mad Max Fury Road is just an amazing piece of cinema. It really shows the wonders that we can do when you really put practical effects on screen, when you do something practical, bringing in a real car, shooting on real locations, doing real stunts. Like it proves that a film like this will age flawlessly forever, no matter how many times it upgrades to different formats or how much it gets tampered with. The practical stuff that will always be there versus stuff like CGI. Minus all that stuff, it's still a brilliantly, breathtakingly shot movie. I mean, George Miller, the guy was in his 70s when he was making this, and it's still more intense and engaging than many, many blockbusters directed by way younger guys and girls half his age. The choreography is amazing. The score by Nokia XL is just immeasurable how awesome it is. The cinematography is beautiful. I mean, the color palette alone makes this worth watching, from the intense oranges and blues and greens, and just everything about this making it feel like a post-apocalyptic world. The recasting of Tom Hardy as the main character I think is a lot of fun. A really good choice to step in for Mel Gibson's character, but filling his own interpretation. Charlize Theron as Furiosa, such a good character that they're making their own spin-off movie, which sucks that she's not going to star in it, but she's still great in this role in this film. And Morton Joe is a brilliant villain, and rest in peace the actor who played him. He was amazing in this film. Just so many awesome, memorable characters. And Nicholas Hoult gives his best performance of his entire career in this movie. Just insane makeup work, insane production design, insane car chases and action sequences, and good emotions too. This film does have a substance to it. It's not just a bunch of car chases and action set pieces, but the action set pieces that are here are just immeasurable. They're incredibly well put together, and it's just such a good thrill ride that I just can't help but keep watching because it's just so much fun. And it's a brilliant movie, and by far the best Mad Max movie by far. And it just pains me to see that we haven't gotten a Mad Max movie in years afterwards.
Number 28.
So long, partner.
Toy Story 3 could have been a very, money-grabbing sequel. Although this did start a very wonky phase of Pixar's history when they would just make sequels non-stop throughout the 2010s, This is still a brilliant conclusion to the Toy Story trilogy and Andy's story. Granted, they did make a fourth film, which I really enjoyed a lot more than I expected, but the reason I was detesting Toy Story 4 for the longest time was because this film ended up the trilogy in such a nice note. Beyond the ending being so emotionally investing and just so satisfying, will make it even the most cynical people shed a cheer. The rest of the film also was just very well done. I like the whole aspect of Andy growing up and the toys trying to find themselves a new place in the world and what's their new purpose now that Andy, their main owner, is now no longer really that invested in them. The whole theme about basically trusting others and realizing your own self-worth, I think, is very well put together. All the new characters we get in this film are fantastic, from Michael Keaton as Ken, the late Ned Beatty as Lotso, the main villain of the film, who is very emotionally investing as well. You understand where he's coming from. All the different side villains as well, that you love to hate. The setting of the daycare also, I think, is very intense in the weirdest ways possible. I think it's really good, showing like these like toddlers as like these horror monsters. I think is very inventive and creative, and showing his first time to director some of Toy Story 4, coming in and basically just doing a stellar job from where John Lasseter left off. And I think he just did an amazing job in the directing department. I think the film's very well written, very well acted from a voice acting standpoint. I think that the animation is beautiful. I still think it still holds up flawlessly over a decade later. The film is really funny when it needs to be. I think it's really emotional when it needs to be. Very scary and intense when it needs to be, especially the third act. Whenever we get to the garbage disposal sequence, I think is very intense. And seeing this for the theaters in the first time when I was 8, that really scared the shit out of me. But I think it's a brilliant conclusion to the trilogy, and I just love it. I think it's my favorite Toy Story sequel and one of my favorite Pixar films to this day.
Number 27.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is an automatic must-watch every single Thanksgiving around my household and the holiday season, and I just love this movie to death. By far my favorite John Hughes movie. I just love the atmosphere this film brings. I love the actors that bring these roles to life, and Steve Martin and John Candy as these two guys just trying to make it to their way home, and all the craziness that ensues on this weird road trip. And just these two are just so likable and fun together that it just sucks that the fact that they never really got to do another film like this again, because they're such a good iconic duo in my opinion. The jokes and the gags we get in this film are iconic, from John Candy turning into the devil whenever they're crashing in between two semis, or the iconic scene where it was like, those aren't pillows, or whenever Steve Martin freaks out at the airport because he can't find a car. All just iconic stuff that you just can't help but just bust out laughing. I think that the emotional investment in this film is also very well. Like the best comedies, it has an emotional center, which makes the film have more weight to it than just dumb jokes. I think that the direction and the writing is also fantastic from John Hughes. I think the film just has this nice flavor to it, to where it's just such a fun and entertaining ride, but also being able to emotionally grab you and make you want to rewatch this film every single holiday season. I think it's just a great holiday movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out.
Number 26.
We die together.
Never die.
We'll never die.
Never.
We're immortal.
Yes. We will never die.
Enter the Void is an insane movie that I didn't really know what to expect walking into it for the first time, and walking out of it, I kind of walked out a different person. Enter the Void really is a piece about life and death, and what really comes after death, and the people that you affect in your life, and just so much more that I really appreciate Gaspar Noé for really tackling these subjects in a very foreign way, which I respect. All of us and different countries and stuff like that, we all have different interpretations of what death is and what purgatory is, and this one explores that extremely well. Whether you watch the theatrical cut or the director's cut, which I watched, which is like 2 hours and 45 minutes, the film just really explores these themes extremely well. The acting is great from the main cast. I think the main character that we follow is very interesting. The way that we learn his backstory and his life throughout the course of the film, I think, is very interestingly told from a story structure standpoint. I think that Gaspar Noé's direction is just flawless. The cinematography on display is absolutely gorgeous. I think it's one of the most beautifully shot films I've ever watched. I mean, the color palette alone, basically the entire film basically looks like a kaleidoscope. I mean, the poster alone will make you mesmerized to watch the movie, and I still think that the poster is probably my favorite poster of all time. I love the look of this film, where it's just constant colors, really emphasizing the drug trip, feeling that you have watching this like you're on a DMT trip. I love it. Acting's great, the writing is great, really grabbing you emotionally, and will leave you in a state to where you don't really know what to think. It will make you appreciate life a whole lot more. The camera work alone is also great. Whenever you see shots, whenever like our main character's in purgatory, and you're just flowing through different rooms and people's lives, and they're almost like different apartments, is very creative. The POV shots we get as well, I think it's also really well done as well. Like, we don't get to see the main character's face a whole lot, but the way that it shoots around it, I also think is really well done to make it feel more personal. It's just a beautiful movie that really, I think more people should check out, and I think not enough people have seen it, unless you're a huge film fan and know about Gaspar Noé. But please, at least once in your life, check this film out, because it will really make you change your life.
Number 25.
I'll rip you up, you bitch! Just like your fucking mother!
You gotta find me first, you pansy-ass mama's boy!
Fuck! Fucking hit me with the phone, dick!
Wes Craven's Scream is an impeccable slasher, and one that really did revive the horror genre after being in the mid-90s and very much needing a revival after just so many flops. And Wes Craven tried to do this beforehand a couple years back with New Nightmare, and although it's a really good movie in its own right, I think that audiences really weren't expecting a Freddy movie to be that meta, and they just didn't get it for the time. And so this film really did boost those concepts that Wes Craven set up in New Nightmare and really elevated it to the highest degree, in my opinion. It's a really well done slasher that is really funny as well. It commentates on the horror genre in the best way possible. I think that all the characters in this film are just all iconic, memorable. I think Sidney Prescott's one of the best final girls of all time. Probably my favorite final girl, to be honest with you, because she's just so likable and so badass when she needs to be. I think that Randy's one of my favorite characters of all time in any movie, and I was so pissed when they killed him off in Scream 2, because Jamie Kennedy just brings such a lightheartedness to this character that I just love. I would like to see him in more Scream movies. You get Stu and Billy, who are just iconic characters in their own right. You also get just the rest of the cast also has as well. You get Henry Winkler as the principal. You get Rose McGowan in a small role in here. You get like a huge ensemble piece, which I think is really well done. Ghostface for such a simple design, someone like Michael Myers and Jason, iconic slasher face that you just instantly know where he's from in the horror genre. The score is great by Marco Beltrami. I think that the atmosphere the film creates is very good. I love the third act set in Stu's house. I think just it creates an extra layer of attention, and the way the film pulls its twists and turns, which is very iconic in the horror genre, I think is handled very well. The pacing is great. The introduction of characters like Dewey and Gale are also iconic as well. I think they're the best those characters have ever been, in my opinion. It's just such an intense, fun, funny ride that I just love watching every single Halloween. I actually watched it in theaters in a re-release last Halloween. I still love this movie. It's great. It's my favorite Wes Craven movie, even over Nightmare on Elm Street. And hopefully they might give a good revival, or maybe a good finish off to the new one coming out in January. But regardless of what that film does, I will still love this film forever.
Number 24.
The Raid is an amazing action film. I already talked about with other foreign films like Train to Busan or I Saw the Devil. I love when foreign films do action set pieces because they just know how to do action way better than us. The way that the film plans out its choreography, and the way that the directing in the forefront from Gareth Evans, how he's able to shoot stuff in a certain way that just makes it iconic, and you know it's his movie when these Raid movies, how he's able to move the camera and how he's able to direct actors and how he's able to just capture every single frame of these set pieces in camera. I just love. And that's basically the main bulk of this film is it's kind of like Die Hard style setup where you get like this regular Joe kind of, I mean, he's very experienced fighter, but he's just this cop who's, being part of this raid to raid this drug dealer, and then they realize they're in a setup. And so basically like 30 some cops are trapped in this building, and they're getting narrowed down to the point where Ugo Uwais is the main character, and Rama basically needs to fight his way out. And the action set pieces in this film are amazing. The choreography, the actual blood, sweat, and tears that were put into these action set pieces are amazing. I love the choreography, I love the directing, I love the writing too. It actually gives some emotional investment to the main characters and why we get certain motivations. The film was so fast-paced, so energetic, just so adrenaline fueling that I just have a complete blast watching this film every single time. I think that just the way the film wraps up is also very perfect, and I think it's just a great contained action story that does the best job of what it's said to do. Be an insane action through a ride, And although we did get a sequel, I wish we got more films out of it in this style. But regardless, I still love this movie. It's brilliant. I love the acting, love the writing, love the directing, love the action. Everything about this film fires on all cylinders, and you need to watch it if you haven't seen it yet.
Number 23.
I hit the main artery. So yeah, it's a real mess in there. On the upside, I think she had a really good time.
What We Do in the Shadows is just a really, really funny comedy. Taika Waititi is a very, I would say he's a very kind of divisive comedian, I would say. I mean, a lot of people like him, but his style of comedy, especially in the States, I hear mixed things about him from a lot of different people. And if you're not really, from New Zealand, I would say, a lot of his comedy doesn't really translate well to American audiences. And I can somewhat see why, but for the most part, I love his style of comedy. The main reason why I watched this film in the first place was because Thor Ragnarok really drew my attention to him, and I decided to binge all of his movies, but pre-Thor Ragnarok, a couple months after it came out, early 2018. And this is by far my favorite Taika Waititi film by a mile, and I love some of his movies, but this film I just think is so damn funny. No wonder there was an FX show based on it that's still running to this day. Just great acting all around. Taika Waititi being one of the main vampires. He's always acting in stuff, but he's really good in here. All the other vampires we get in here, and basically, meeting them, like 3 or 4 guys, basically just in their flat, how they live their life in this mockumentary style shoot, which I think is really funny. The way this is lighthearted tone, being able to balance the dark humor with the light humor, I think is very well paced, and the way that the film sets up its jokes, I think is very well timed, and timing is a major part of making the comedy work, and I think Taika Waititi and his other actors just sell it in spades. The main characters we do get in the arcs we do travel throughout the runtime, I think is very emotionally investing, and you do care about what happens to these people, and by the end, you feel satisfied with what happens. I think the film's really funny, I think the film's really sweet when it needs to be, and not just like a bunch of raunch, which you get for a lot of comedies nowadays. It's just so heartfelt in the right places, but not afraid to get bloody at points, which I think is also kind of cool. It's just a really good comedy, and I wish more people talked about it.
Number 22.
So many sacrifices just to find you. Jesus Christ.
M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong's Unbreakable. This is by far my favorite film from this director. And I do like some of his movies, but I am very mixed on him as a filmmaker, especially nowadays. Like, even after Old, I'm still like, he's a very hit-and-miss director, but I do love Unbreakable, even more than The Sixth Sense or Signs, or some of the films that people do praise. I think this film is a masterpiece of cinema. Not just superhero films, not just dramatic thrillers, but as a whole, I love this movie. It's so unique and just so screams his style of filmmaking in the best aspects possible, to where it's not just about the twist, it's not just about trying to fool you, it's about setting up this world, setting up these interesting characters, and these mythological beings being transported, and these themes that dating back to, these ancient beings and such like that travel all the way down to modern comic books, and that idea about these, larger than life things that most people don't even recognize or don't even really think about are still living in this world, and are just translated in the most mundane way possible, with David Dunn, with Bruce Willis giving his most subdued performance in the great way. He could have easily played this like as dull as he now acts in straight to VOD movies, but he just handles it like when he used to actually care about acting. He just has this nuance to him that's just so endearing, and just you can tell he's a broken man from the inside in the most subtle ways possible, to where kind of like Brad Pitt and Ad Astra, I'd probably give like the most recent comparison, to where he's so just underseen, he's just so subdued that you don't really know this character's pain until you really realize it through the great writing and great directing, and really showing how peeled back and how just lost his character truly is in his own world, where he doesn't know what he is and what he wants to be. Samuel L. Jackson, I mean, these two already played great in Die Hard with a Vengeance, but they're even better in here. Samuel L. Jackson is just fantastic as Mr. Glass. I think like Elijah Price is just a very interesting character in and of itself, this broken character as well, on the opposite end of the spectrum, trying to find his place in the world. So he's so desperate to find his place in the world that he's willingly to just kill hundreds of people, which is the main twist of the film, which I suppose you already know. There's already a trilogy of these movies. But the fact that he's able to sacrifice tons of people just so he can find his purpose is a very interesting concept, because he does believe he's the right person in the situation, and the best villains are like that, and that's what I love about his character. The score by James Newton Howard is impeccable. I love the score. It just makes you feel so much emotion in the film when they could have just been very boring, mundane stuff, like the Orange Man sequence. I think it's so much more powerful because of the score, the lighting, and the directing is great from Shyamalan, along with the writing. So many iconic lines in this film. David Dunn's relationship with his son, and like the whole scene with like the gun, trying to like see if David Dunn can be impenetrated, kind of like the George Reeves Superman bullet story. Just so many subtle things about this film that's just so expertly handled by Shyamalan back when he gave a shit about directing. And I just love this movie. It's just so well crafted, so unique, so ahead of its time before the superhero genre really blew up. And I just love this film to death. It's just an amazing movie. And I wish it was carried better by Glass, even though I do like the movie. But still, this is by far my favorite film from Shyamalan, and I highly doubt that anything will meet the expectations or the quality of this film ever again in his career.
Number 21.
If you deliberately sabotage my band, I will fuck you like a pig. Now, are you a rusher, or are you a dragger, or are you gonna be on my fucking time?
I'm gonna be on your time.
Whiplash is one intense therapy session of a movie. It is a wild ride, and it's a movie about a drumming student in school. Like, you don't expect a simple story like that to be as enthralling as it is, but Damien Chazelle in the writing and directing seat does such a great job at making you care about our main character and caring about this world, and making you really realize the depths that people will go to just so they can appease their superiors and try to make it out in their industries. Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons are just impeccable in this movie. They are amazing, especially J.K. Simmons definitely deserved the Oscar that year it came out. The score and the being about music, of course, the music, jazz type stuff we get in the soundtrack is just amazing, and the score himself too, especially the final drumming solo we get in this film, is just absolutely timeless. Just love this movie. I think that the editing is flawless. I think that the timing in between the intense sequences of just these two characters and J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller just clashing against one another is just so well paced out. I think the film is really intense when it needs to be, but also is very character driven and does allow time to mellow and really develop both sides of these characters and really show them as human beings and not just an Oscar reel. I think the film's just really well handled from just a writing standpoint. The story structure, I think, is really well done. The directing is amazing. It's just a brilliant movie that, again, is unlike most other films I've seen in a while, before and after, and it's just a brilliant movie and definitely deserves the awards it got.
Number 20.
Monsters, Inc. is a great Pixar film, and my second favorite Pixar film, and my second favorite anime film to this day. I absolutely love this movie. It's such a unique concept, and the first Pixar film directed by Pete Docter, who no wonder why he's now the head of Pixar, because he's just a fantastic director. I mean, Soul is my favorite film of last year. He did a great job with Up. He's just a fantastic director, and this is no exception. Brilliant and creative imagination brought to this film, which the best Pixar films do. Being this very interesting concept about this world, about these monsters, having to scare kids in order to fuel energy for their world. It's just a cool concept brought to life by amazing voice actors in John Goodman and Billy Crystal as Sully and Mike, iconic characters in the Pixar lore, I would say. Steve Buscemi as Randall, the main villain, or like the main villain, but aside from Water News, I think he's amazing and just such a memorable and just likable villain that you love to hate. Boo, the main girl that basically Sully and Mike have to learn to appreciate and learn to care for, I think is also very cute, and just the right amount of cute to where it doesn't feel pandering. It feels genuine within the story's context, and the way that she interacts with all the different monsters, I think it's just comedic timing gold. I think the huge sequences we get in this film, like the whole third act, like the doors and having to break in different worlds, I think is also very funny, along with it being very intense as well. And the emotional beats we get in this film are also very resonant, in my opinion. They feel earned, they feel organic within the film's context, and they feel organic from a character standpoint. I think the world's very explored. I think that the characters are great. I think that the writing's amazing, both from a different standpoint, from comedic timing to story structure to the world building. I think it's all handled expertly well by amazing talent on screen and off screen. Just Great animation, still holds up 20 years later, great soundtrack, and I just love this movie. It's so damn entertaining, so damn fun, and still a film that's aged flawlessly with a course of 20 years.
Number 19.
When they come, and they will, they'll come for you.
I have an army.
We have a Hulk.
The Avengers, along with Skyfall, was one of the films, mainly the first film that got me truly into filmmaking. I would not be standing here in front of this camera today if it wasn't for seeing this film on my 10th birthday a little over 9 years ago. This film is just amazing. Yes, there are a couple issues with this film. Yes, there is flat lighting. Yes, there are things that could have tweaked better, but for me, personally, I do love this film just because it has so much nostalgia tied to me, and just it's a great film on its own. Like, the fact that Marvel managed to get all these characters together for the first time, and it was a huge risk. I mean, most of these characters were unknowns. Even after their solo movies, they were not huge stars. They were not Spider-Man, they were not X-Men, they weren't Fantastic Four. But these characters are also likable and also fleshed out that you just care about every single one of them, and their banter is amazing. I mean, the dialogue in this film is fantastic, and still has some of the best banter in the MCU. I mean, the fight scene between Cap and Iron Man in the helicarrier when they're shouting at each other is still some of the best dialogue stuff you'll see in the MCU, regardless of how many films have come after it. I think the action is amazingly put together from a CGI standpoint, along with the camera work and the cinematography. I think that the score script by Alan Silvestri, even the soundtrack is also very catchy as well. You get Loki, who I think is the best he's ever been in the MCU. I love him as a villain. He's just so charismatic and just so evil and conniving that he's just way more complex. And even though I do like him as a good guy as well, I think that just Tom Hiddleston just brings this this naturally evil persona to Loki. Just makes him so damn fun to see on screen. The action is great. I think that all the other actors are also great. Colby Smulders, Samuel L. Jackson, Clark Gregg as Phil Coulson is a really good arc close in here. I'm kind of glad he hasn't come back in the MCU because I think it felt earned that he was the main push to put the Avengers together to make them assemble. I think that it's so damn entertaining, so damn fast paced. Just constantly just on the move, doesn't really waste much time getting to the story because they already set up 5 movies establishing who these characters are. They just need to throw these characters together, kind of like Infinity War. I like the fact that you can just turn this movie on and just have a complete blast with beginning to end, and it just doesn't stop. It's such a fun movie, so action-packed, so entertaining. It's a thrower from beginning to end. It's still one of the best comic book films to this day, and primarily the reason why we're in this huge superhero boom of cinematic universes even a decade later.
Number 18.
You're pathetic.
I am.
You're not a real woman. You're not a real woman. You can't even have kids.
Mother,
You
Tyler.
can't even have kids. You say one more thing like that to her, I'm gonna come over there and lay your ass. Fuck you. Fuck you. Yeah. Fuck you. I fucking hate you, man.
Waves is a beautiful family drama. This was a film that I heard a couple good things about, but after, I didn't really know what to expect after Dre Edward Schultz's kind of mixed reaction to It Comes the Night. I liked the movie, but I didn't love it. And I picked this film up at Target last summer, not really expecting a whole lot. I just heard a couple good things about it, and I was blown away by the amount of passion that was put into this project. I think it's by far his best work, and that's saying a lot because I do love Krisha as well. It's a great movie. It almost made this list, by the way. But this film is just impeccable. I love this movie. It is just damn near flawless, in my opinion. It is so beautifully put together. It is so emotionally resonant from just all these different aspects. You get this family drama that has so much undercurrent subtext in here. You got a race and relationship in here. You get this family drama about expectations, and you get a main character in Kelvin Harrison Jr. basically having to meet the expectations of his father, played by Sterling K. Brown, who's impeccable in this movie. I absolutely love him. Best performance of his career. A fantastic score, lovely cinematography. I mean, Florida's a kind of a trash state, but I like the fact that it actually makes it look beautiful with all the different shots and it kind of leading to the film's title. The emotional investment in this film is beautiful. I love the human relationships. I think that just the film leaves you on a note to where you really don't know what to think and it merits discussions. It's a beautifully put together movie, great directing, great writing, just amazingly put together, and just sucks the fact that no one really talks about this movie that much. It is an amazing film, and please check it out because it is the shit. It is amazing because it is just beautiful.
Number 17.
Yo! Hold up! Time out! Time out! Y'all take a chill. You need to cool that shit out.
Do the Right Thing is an amazing piece on racism and how it affects everyone in a community. No matter what race you are, no matter what color you are, you can be racist either way, any way possible, and it's equally just as hateful and equally just as wrong. And this film tackles that subject matter effectively, and sadly still holds up over 30 years later at this point. The acting is phenomenal. I mean, you get Spike Lee, who surprisingly looks very young for a 32-year-old at the time of filming this. You have Rosa Perez, you got Samuel L. Jackson as the DJ host, he's great. You get the Italians in here, you get the Asian guy running the convenience store, you get the white cops. I mean, everyone in this movie is just so diverse, but also equally hateful on all different sides. The film takes so many great directions, and the way the film has a really dark undertone to it, but also is very comedic and very lighthearted in a lot of moments. There's a lot of great lines that just will stick with you throughout the entire runtime. The way the film is shot and edited, I think is really well done, especially towards like the POV scenes whenever you like have someone just like speaking in their mind and you just look directly at the camera, just breaking the fourth wall as if you're part of the audience. I don't know, it's just very well shot and very unique. And unlike many other films I've seen before and since this film, I've watched it. Great soundtrack as always, very early 90s, late 80s synth type stuff, and I really enjoy it. Great production design, really making this, small strip of this New York just feeling very lively and just very, unique and sticking out in the best way possible. Very fast paced, very engaging, very heartbreaking in a lot of spots, just very, very outlandish in the best way. And does leave you with a message and leaving you with just this feeling that, you gotta fix humanity in ways that I think is very creative, not just beating you over the head with a sledgehammer. It's very creative in the way it handles its messages, and that's why it holds up over 30 years later. It's fantastic, and if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out.
Number 16.
Stark. You know me? I do. You're not the only one cursed with knowledge.
My only curse is you.
Avengers Infinity War is my favorite comic book film of all time. I absolutely love this movie to death. No pun intended. This movie is just brilliant in many ways. I wasn't really excited for this film walking into it. Of course, I was looking forward to it because it was a Marvel movie, but because it was a part 1 of a part 2 finale, and because growing up with the whole YA craze of like every single final chapter had to end with a part 1, part 2 finale, like Hunger Games, Mockingjay, or Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows, or even Allegiant. Divergent never got a second final part, but we got that first part that was terrible. We were so used to and keen to seeing so many movie franchises end on that part 1, part 2 note that I felt like Infinity War was just going to be a bunch of build-up, and Endgame would just be all the payoff, so I would have to wait an extra year to get all the satisfaction. When in reality, this film is a self-contained film in and of itself. If this was the end of the MCU, it's a very dark turn, but it could have been the end of the MCU. It's a self-contained story that, similar to the first Avengers, is handled so well and flows so much better due to the fact that there were 18 films before this that subbed this entire world on all these characters, but they subbed one character, and that's Thanos. It's basically his movie. He gets to rule the screen unlike any other MCU film previously, and he is amazing. Josh Brolin does a great job in the acting department, from voice acting and also in the physical work. Like, all the CGI is just impeccable with this character, and he just looks so damn realistic. He's so tangible around these actual human characters like Robert Downey Jr. and the Guardians of the Galaxy and Spider-Man that you forget that he's a CGI character. Marvel does a great job if they get it right, because they did Black Panther a few months earlier and that looked like trash, like the final act, but you realize because they just spent all of their time and effort putting into this incredible visual effects. It's an absolute spectacle, and I love it. And even years later, it still holds up very well. I love the score by Alan Silvestri. I think it's very, atmospheric and very much complements the film's scenes that it's placed in. I think that there's so many great moments in this final chapter. In sorts, you get like that kind of Thor scene where he's like, "Bring me Thanos." You get like the whole fight scene between Iron Man and Thanos where he's like, "I hope they remember you." And the amount of character development we get with Thanos in this film is just so well done. And the fact he's still kind of a mysterious character, but you give enough of him to where you understand his motivation. The fact that he believes he's in the right. He believes he's doing the universe a favor, and that's what makes him such a threat, because he's not just trying to take over the world. He's not a ruler. He just wants the universe to be balanced, and that's what makes him such a threat, because he's just so righteous in his beliefs that he'll do anything to get rid of him. Even sacrifice his own daughter to get what he wants, and that's a terrifying villain when he has nothing to lose. Just this one's amazing. It's so fast-paced. It just flows. Like, it's a 2.5-hour movie. It feels like 2 minutes. It just flows so gracefully, and the ending is just so damn jaw-dropping. Yes, I understand that because of Endgame, we knew that these characters weren't going to be dead, but the fact the film ends on this ballsy note, I just really like that. And there's all the banter we get between all the different characters. You know, I love the banter between Thor and the Guardians, or Iron Man and Star-Lord and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. They're all great amongst each other. There's like so many great banter between all these different characters that you've wanted to see for years. And the Russo brothers just do a great job at just fleshing out all these different characters and just being able just to throw them into scenarios and not have to worry about it feeling overstuffed. This film's paced beautifully. Also, from the writing by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, doing a fantastic job yet again. I just think it's a brilliant movie, great epic in the best way possible. Gives you every emotion you want from a film like this. It's action-packed, the action's fantastic, gives you great emotional stakes, it gives you great jokes. It's an amazing movie and an amazing part 1 to a final installment of the Infinity Saga, while also being a great film in and of itself.
Number 15.
Hi, Lloyd. A little slow tonight, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Mr. Torrance.
Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Most people would say it's one of the best horror films of all time, one of the best adaptations of all time, and one of the best Stephen King adaptations of all time. Well, except for Stephen King himself, but, you know, opinions are opinions. I love this movie. I just rewatched it because I'm going to do a giant Stephen King ranking for Halloween next month, and rewatching this film for the first time in quite a while, I just realized just how great this film still is. I mean, I already liked it beforehand, I already did love it, but this really did open the door for me in a lot of aspects. The way that Kubrick is able to meticulously put every single scene together, and you can tell that this guy put years and years of his life into this project, like most of his other best movies of all time, just because he's able to create a story that is just so damn investing and so damn just interesting, and you want to explore like the Overlook Hotel and all the history of it and the deception of madness that Jack Nicholson goes into and against his family, and just the suspense that is just put into this movie. Even like the random stuff like the bear sequence, or you know, stuff like that that's just so odd and out of nowhere. It's just fantastic. I think Jack Nicholson gives one of his best performances, if not his best performance of his career in this film as Jack Torrance. Absolutely terrifying character that at first just kind of seems like this nosy guy that turns to just this absolute psychopath. Has some of the best, most iconic moments of horror of all time. I love the other side characters he interacts with and all the ghosts they interacts with, like the bartender or the waiter in the bathroom. Just so many great moments in this film, and the shot is just beautiful. The movie just looks beautiful all around. I love the look of the hotel. It just, the atmosphere just reeks of just this decrepit old place that should slowly be reawakened by this family being present there. The synth score is iconic. The way the film is shot and like all those drilling shots, especially in the opening titles, is just amazing. The film is perfectly paced for a 2.5-hour movie. It just flows consistently and smoothly. It's a film that merits discussion. It's a film that has a bunch of subtext in there, and like the isolation and the madness just being ensued there upon the ghost stuff going on. It's great on the surface level. It's great underneath the surface level. It's just great all around. It's a brilliant movie, and it's still one of the best horror films, even nearly 40 years later.
Number 14.
Luca Guadagnino's Suspiria is a terrifying reintroduction into this world that Dario Argento created nearly 40 years prior, and is still a brilliant retelling of this story that does a lot of things differently than the original film in the best way possible. This is an amazing remake that really does tell the story in a very unique way, from the amazing actors that portray these characters. I mean, it's mostly a female cast, and they're all amazing. From Dakota Johnson, who this was really the year that she started to break out from the 50 Shades trilogy with this and Bad Times at the El Royale, and she's still done a lot of great indie stuff beyond this, but this is her best performance thus far as the main character. You have Tilda Swinton playing 4 different roles in here. She's amazing. Mia Goth is in here. Just so many great actresses in this role that are just like, they're all amazing in this film. Luke Guadagnino's direction is just flawless. I love the way it's shot, especially like the Volk sequence, the way that it's the dance school is shot, the way the film meticulously puts together these different death sequences are all creative and all stand out amongst each other. The score by Tom York, the famous Radiohead artist, is just amazing in this movie. The way the film was able to twist certain elements of the original by making Susie not exactly who she says she is, and the way the film is a lot more dampened as in terms of the color palette from the original film, which was very brightly colored, which I think complements the darker tone of the film and actually makes it stand out amongst more than the original. I think that's just, the film's so perfectly paced. Again, it's a 2.5-hour movie that is just so smoothly paced that it doesn't feel boring, or it doesn't drag for a single millisecond. I think that just the scares in this film feel genuinely real. The film surprises are actually surprising, in my opinion. I think that there's so many great shots and just so many great creepy imagery and visuals and practical effects that all complement the film in itself. It's just a beautifully put together film that I truly do love, and if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out, especially since it's free on Amazon Prime. It's a beautifully put together movie.
Number 13.
Well, actually, I had it painted yesterday, so the paint might still be kind of sticky. Or this is great, man. Yeah, this is really great. You want to go for a ride, or? Wait! Fuck! Hell, how much time is up? I'm sorry, sir.
What the hell is the matter with you?
I'm sorry.
Why did you do that, Scotty?
Boogie Nights is an amazing epic by the legend Paul Thomas Anderson. This is an amazing movie. What could have been a very just kind of cheap little quirky period piece in the hands of a lesser director, Paul Thomas Anderson manages to make this simple story of just these characters running around in the 70s making porno together, turns basically into the rise of the fall in the porn industry within this movie. It is so methodically paced, it is so epic in scale with how many characters we get in this movie. I mean, the cast alone is just amazing. It's so stacked. Mark Wahlberg, Burt Reynolds, Heather Graham, Don Cheadle, Phil Seymour Hoffman, may you rest in peace, John C. Reilly, Julianne Moore, just amazing cast member after amazing cast members. They're all ingenious in this film, and all the characters get time to breathe and develop and really grow over the course of these 2.5 hours, which once again, like Suspiria, like The Shining, it's just so perfectly methodically paced to where it doesn't drag for a single millisecond. I think the soundtrack is very fits within the film's context of being set in the 70s, but doesn't feel like member berries. It does fit within the film's story and context, and just feels like an extra layer just being cool in the 70s and being with these characters. I think the film's so expertly shot and just so many great scenes in this film that, you know, it has a great tonal balance of being able to be really light and fun in the first kind of half and the very ending. But there's so many sequences in this film that like kind of throw you off guard and are able to be really, really dark out of nowhere. But it doesn't feel inconsistent. It feels like with this underground porn industry and this kind of shady business, it comes with a lot of, you know, really big caveats. You get some really dark sequences like when Roller Girl gets beat up, or when Mark Wahlberg's trying to suck dick to get coke, or the scene with Don Cheadle in the donut store. Or, you know, so many scenes like that that are just so dark. Or like the scene with Phil Seymour Hoffman trying to kiss Mark Wahlberg and it failing at it. Like, just so many moments that just twist the knife into your heart and you're just like, ugh. Like, you get that secondhand embarrassment. And because you're so invested in the runtime and all these characters, I think that the writing's fantastic. The dialogue is all amazing, in my opinion. I think the sound design, the production design, making this feel like the 70s is great. The film is just so much fun and just has, by the end, you just feel like you lived with a bunch of good friends. You know what I'm saying? Like, you feel like you experienced something more than just a movie. It's amazingly put together, and I love this movie.
Number 12.
You are a toy! You weren't the real Buzz Lightyear, you're an action figure! You are a child's plaything!
You are a sad, strange little man.
The original Toy Story, the film that started off Pixar's huge reputation in the film industry, is still my favorite Pixar film that they have made over the course of these past 25, 26 years, and still remain unmatched in my opinion. Despite how great the sequels are to this franchise, I still love this first film. Yes, I understand why people say that the animation's outdated. I never really felt that, mainly because growing up with this movie, I just got used to this style of animation. I still think it looks pretty solid by today's standards. I think that the amazing voice cast from Tom Hanks or Tim Allen, John Ratzenberger, the late Don Rickles and Jim Varney, and just so many other cast members that just bring life to these iconic characters now. I think that the story about just these toys trying to adjust this new member in Buzz Lightyear, and Woody grows jealous of this, you know, new toy that's taken over Andy's attention, and then the journey that they have to go on together to appreciate one another and learn their side of humanity almost. It's just very intriguing, and I think it's also very well handled. The comedy in this film is just timeless. It's so many great jokes, so many great little rants that Tom Hanks goes on, and just their banter between him and Buzz Lightyear is just classic stuff. Sid as a villain I think is iconic, and just the way that he gets his comeuppance at the very end is just iconic. I mean, so play nice. Just great stuff in this movie. Just so many great iconic lines, great character development, great tension when it needs to be, really funny when it needs to be, really heartfelt when it needs to be, and will forever hold a special place in my heart because it's a brilliant movie.
Number 11.
When I find you.
Pop quiz, hotshot. There's a bomb on a bus. Once the bus goes 50 miles an hour, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, it blows up. What do you do?
Speed is an awesome early 90s action film. It could have just been a throwaway Die Hard knockoff in the era of which basically every single action film from the 90s was a Die Hard knockoff after the success of that movie, which we'll talk about later. This film, for me, does a lot more than just take the Die Hard template. It is so damn entertaining. It is so damn fast-paced and fun and energetic and adrenaline rushing. It's just like a brilliant, fun action movie. It does exactly what it sets it to be and so much more. The acting across the board, I think, is great. Keanu Reeves does his role as Jack Traven as best as he could have done for the time. I think that Sandra Bullock is a great addition. Dennis Hopper plays one of my favorite villains in any movie. He's just so damn threatening, and his monologue speeches are also great, and the way he's always interacting with Keanu Reeves, but they're not in the same room. It's kind of like Heat, where like they're both not really on screen together for that long, but when they're, you know, all talking over the phone, it's just so damn threatening and so damn intense that you're just like, you don't know what's gonna happen next between these two characters. I think something on the bus allows them to keep moving on a pace, and always allows something to become interesting, because this concept of being stuck on a bus that has to go 50 miles an hour after it hits a certain timer or hits this little detonator thing that sets this timer off, and basically like if it doesn't go under if it goes under 50 miles an hour, it explodes. That allows them to have constant tension in the way that you know, this film constantly puts these characters in these roadblock situations, to where like you get the scene whenever like they have to jump the ramp, which is kind of stupid, but I still think it's pretty fun. I think that like whenever you get the road spikes in the airport at the very end, or whenever I have to change gas, or whenever like one of them gets injured during like a shootout and they have to carry the one of the women or one of the passengers off of the bus while Dennis Hopper's watching, and they have to like outsmart him in many moments, like, you know, reversing the video cameras. I just think it's all so fun and so damn intense, and still just very creative, because the film constantly allows the film to keep having tension. Even when they get off the bus onto the train, it still is very exciting in a lot of ways. I love the chemistry between Jeff Daniels and Keanu Reeves. I think that's probably one of Jeff Daniels' darker roles. That's why I thought this came out the same year as Dumb and Dumber, but he's great in this movie. I forgot to mention that. And just the score is great, the soundtrack is great, the cinematography is really good. I think that the film is just, it exactly knows what it wants to be, and just sees that in all spades. I love this film. It's still one of my favorite action movies of all time, and I do not give a shit. I love this movie.
Number 10.
I'll see you. Not if I see you first.
Stand By Me is my favorite adaptation of a Stephen King novel of all time. Some people will say Shawshank, some people will say The Shining, some people will say Green Mile, but I love Stand By Me the most. I think that this is the quintessential coming-of-age film. It is just so heartwarming and so heartbreaking in a lot of moments that really show the maturity of these four boys, and a simple story about these four boys trekking to find a dead body for a reward, just to see it as well. And the way that they kind of grow over the course of the film by interacting with all these different characters. I mean, you get Keith Sutherland as the main bully. He's great in this movie, and this came out the same year as, or like the year after The Lost Boys, or the year before The Lost Boys, and he's great in this movie. Still one of his best roles. You get like so many great scenes, like the deer, whenever like, you know, the main character just comes across a deer and he's just like, you know, I didn't tell anyone about that. It was like my special moment. It's just certain little things like that that make the film have so much more weight to it. Rob Reiner's direction is just flawless in this film. I think that there's some intense moments, like whenever they have to outrun the train on the train tracks. I think is very intense, but the film also allows the film to be very heartwarming, very heartbreaking, especially whenever you compare it to River Phoenix's real life and what happened to him eventually, rest in peace. But it's just so damn sad. And also the other two actors, in Corey Feldman and Jerry O'Connell, are also great side additions to the film, and allow the film to have a lot of comedy, but also have some dramatic elements as well. It's just so many, the characters in this film are just so damn endearing and just so fun to be around, and you care about all of them, and just seeing how real life really does play into everything by the end, I think is just so, you really do appreciate life in a different way after watching the film, because I think it's just so, it just does stuff different than from a lot of other films I've seen. It is just it just sticks with you in your head forever, in my opinion. And I just love this movie to death. It is an amazing piece of cinema.
Number 9.
The Raid 2 is probably my favorite action film of all time when we're discussing choreography standpoints. I think the action sequences of this film are meticulously put together. They are just impeccable. They are flawless. They are just the cream of the crop when it comes to action set pieces. I already talked about the first film with how great those action set pieces were, but this film only takes it up a notch. It does a Terminator 2 approach of we're going to go bigger and better and badder, and it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like they're just doing the same thing over again. It allows the story from the first film to carry over and allows it to develop and kind of recontextualize your thoughts on the first film. It allows our main character, Rama, to face new consequences. And all the new villains we come across in this film are a lot more memorable than the villains in the first film. I mean, we get the one with the baseball bats, or no, we get the guy with the baseball bat and the woman with the hammer, and we get the guy in the kitchen with the hooks. There's so many really cool villains that have their own little gimmick to them that I think is just a lot of fun. The action is just absolutely spectacular. It's just what I want to see of an action movie. Real stunts happen by real people that aren't afraid to get grisly, aren't afraid to go gory, and just makes the film that much more entertaining and that much more intense. Outside of that, the story is very entertaining. The story is very investing. The pacing is fantastic. I mean, you get Gareth Evans coming back from the first film, and he just did a great job at just continuing his universe in a great way. Love the world building that's up in this film, and I just love all the acting across the board. Uki Uwais is still an amazing actor in Rama, and it sucks to the fact that we really haven't gotten many roles from him outside of this franchise, I would call that. But it's just, everything about this film just works so damn well. It's so fast-paced, so enthralling, so entertaining, so much fun that I wish we got more Raid movies. I hope to God we get a Raid 3 at some point, but it's been, 7 years since the first film came out, or this movie came out. We'll see what happens, but as for this movie, I still love this movie, and I walked away from it just being satisfied as a final chapter, but if we ever get more, I'm down for it.
Number 8.
Look at that subtle off-white coloring. The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my God. It even has a watermark.
American Psycho is a great satire on the American culture of the 80s, way before, we got stuff like Stranger Things and other stuff like it that really capitalized on that time period. Kind of like The Wedding Singer in a way, but this is way more dark, way more comedically funny in my opinion. Although I do like Wedding Singer, I think this film is a lot darker, a lot funnier. Because it's my style of humor, I like that dark satire. I like Christian Bale's performance as Patrick Bateman. I mean, he's one of the quintessential icons of the 21st century, in my opinion. He is just so damn narcissistic. And I met people who like him in real life, not murderous, but very narcissistic, that he just adds an extra layer of just asshole-ish to him that, I can personally relate to what his struggles are, not from a personal standpoint, but, from other people. I think the gore in this film's expertly handled well in the way that it doesn't feel gratuitous, but it also does stand out in the best way possible. I think the scoring's great. I think the soundtrack is used perfectly. Huey Lewis in the News. I mean, I cannot listen to that soundtrack without thinking of American Psycho at this point. I think that the aesthetic of the 80s allows them to have a style to it, but without it feeling like member berries. I think that the direction is handled expertly well. I think the writing's fantastic, and the way the film's able to have actual subtext and meaning behind all the kills and all the carnage that happens in the movie. Patrick Bateman's character switch throughout the entire runtime, and you really don't know what side he's on. As in terms of, is he going to go too far? Is he going to get caught? Is he going to be more remorseful? You don't really know what this character's going to go through throughout the course of the runtime, despite the fact that we hear his narration of the entire course in the movie. But Patrick Bateman just is such an enthralling character, and this is by far Christian Bale's best performance, which is saying a lot. All the other actors are great. All the other side roles are fantastic. I think that this film is just so flawlessly executed in the best way possible. And I hope there's never a remake. I hope we got a terrible sequel, but I hope there's nothing else that comes out of this series because I love this first film. There's nothing else you can do that hasn't already been done better. And it's just so damn entertaining. It's scary when it needs to be. It's funny when it needs to be. I absolutely adore this movie, and it's just still one of my favorite films to this day.
Number 7.
Hereditary is the only horror film that I've seen to this day in my 19 years of living on this earth that has truly startled me. It's a horror film that, amongst the sea of disturbing movies I've seen like Martyrs or Texas Chainsaw Massacre or, you know, the tons of like gore stuff like Saw or Hostel or whatever you call this, cerebral stuff like David Lynch, and just all the different types of genres and time periods I've seen horror, this is the only film that I've seen thus far that truly has an effect on me to where I'm genuinely scared to rewatch it. I saw it once in the theaters over 3 years ago, and I've since not really had the courage to rewatch it again, which is strange and uncommon for me personally because I'm usually a huge fan of horror. I'm usually not really scared that much by horror movies, you know, because I can usually tell movies are fake. And I've had that mentality since I was young, but something about this movie, something about this film just really irks me. It struck a nerve inside of me that no other horror film has even gotten close to getting. It is just so... It's much more than just a haunting movie. It's so much more than the trailers let it to be. And walking into the film when I saw it nearly 3 years ago, or a little over 3 years ago, I just kind of expected like an Exorcist type movie, and something way more dramatic than I expected. It is such an emotionally riveting movie. The family ties this film has, and the way its messages are pulled across beautifully by Ari Aster in the writing and directing seats, it just has this effect on me that it just really struck a personal chord inside of me. I don't know how to explain it. There's just certain things about this film that really just I related to and just really kind of exposed something inside of me, and it really deeply disturbed me. There's so many iconic images in this film that people already know, apart from like, you know, the iconic, you know, the noise, or, you know, standing in the shadow, that telephone pole scene, or that ending scene with the payment in the treehouse, or the dad being set on fire, or, you know, the mom played by the amazing Toni Collette, who should have gotten an Oscar that year it came out. Her amazing rant at the dinner table. It's just, there's so much stuff in this film that just has so much more weight to it and has so much more meaning to pause and really ponder about meaning of life and death and how to move on and all the struggles and manipulation and all this stuff that just most horror films barely tackle. This film is way more resonant than a generic haunting movie. It is so disturbing. And not only that, it's just the score by Colin Stetson is incredible. It is genuinely creepy, and I cannot listen to it without getting like anxiety. It is just so methodically paced out, brilliantly structured, great writing, directing. It's just so much more than just a generic horror film, and it's still the scariest film I've ever seen in my life. It is a just masterfully constructed movie. Great acting across the board. Toni Collette, Gabriel Byrne, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, just all the other side roles as well are all fantastic. The score is great. The cinematography is beautiful. The way the film's shot, kind of like a dollhouse almost. Like you get those sequences where like the rooms will be zoomed down to the house, or like you'll get like scenes where like the a room or a tree house will be like cut out and all you see is just blackness outside a border, or just so much artistic direction in this film that I absolutely loved. It's a beautifully structured movie, insanely creepy in the right moments, and just a film that just disturbed me down to my core, and it's still a film that I have yet to rewatch just because there's just something about that I just cannot get past. And for a horror film to do that to me, as someone who's like as experienced in the genre, hands off to you, Ari Aster. Despite the fact I'm not a huge fan of Midsommar, I will see whatever he comes up with next, because this film really showed me that this guy is truly the next masterwork of horror.
Number 6.
One thing about living in Santa Carla I never could stomach. All the damn vampires.
The Lost Boys, another amazing 80s film that I absolutely adore. This is another film that once again captures the 80s in the best way possible. I mean, this was shot in 86, but still, like, it just oozes the atmosphere so well in a way that just makes the film feel timeless. You know, despite the fact you get technology that's from the 80s, it just tells such a classic story that is timeless, in my opinion. I love this film. I think that Joel Schumacher gets way too much hate just for directing Batman and Robin and Batman Forever. He's done a whole lot more stuff than that, and this is the cream of the crop when it comes to his filmography, and may he rest in peace. He did an amazing job of this movie. It's by far my favorite vampire movie ever made. I think that's one of my favorite horror films ever made, especially when you're talking about horror comedies. I mean, I just got done talking about American Psycho, but I think this is by far my favorite film that it's ever touched that subgenre. The villains are fantastic. I mean, I just got done about Stand By Me, and Keith Sutherland is just a fantastic villain. And also we get the secret vampire in Jerry, who's just such a, maniacal character. He's just so like under the radar. When you get that twist reveal at the very end, it's just so damn entertaining. The grandpa's great in the movie. All the other acting is fantastic. I mean, you get Jason Patric, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, that's Edgar Frog, and the Frog Brothers themselves are just so damn entertaining, and there's a great addition to the film. All the other vampires we get are all entertaining. The character arcs we get through with our main character Michael trying to take care of this woman and her kid, and having to turn against the vampires and turn him into a half vampire, and the rules that are established in this universe are just so introspective and so interesting that you want to learn more about this universe. And it's just so damn good. I love the soundtrack. I love the atmosphere the film brings. I love this summer aesthetic it has to it, where like it just feels freeing. It feels like you're in this summer atmosphere with these characters in Long Beach, and just like it is so unique. So many great shots, so many great directing, great writing, great acting, great editing, great special effects. Everything in this film just fires on all cylinders, and I just adore this movie. It is fantastic, and yeah, it's the best of its kind in my opinion.
Number 5.
You ever listen to K. Billy's Super Sounds of the 70s? It's my personal favorite.
Reservoir Dogs is a brilliant debut by the one and only Quentin Tarantino in the best way possible. This is a filmmaker that, apart from a couple of short films, really didn't have much experience beforehand, and this film does not prove that at all. This feels like an experienced filmmaker just doing another great movie, but no, the fact this is a first-time filmmaker making a movie like this, and the amount of talent he got on screen for his first outing from Michael Madsen, Harvey Keitel, Steve Buscemi, Tim Roth, just so many iconic actors in this movie that are just so well placed in their banter and their dialogue and their placement in the story. They're just all fantastic. The way the film's structured about being a heist movie without the heist sounds very uninteresting on the surface, but the way the film's told out of order, similar to another film we'll talk about later on in his career, it's just so unique in the way it's structured, and it's so exciting because the film allows us to reveal things that if it was told chronologically you would get, kind of like Memento. It's just like it peels back the layers so much. The acting is incredible across the board. The dialogue is so iconic. So many great scenes, and I love films that are just set over the course of one day, over the course of one location, which I talked about earlier in this video. But the way it's just stuck in this like one abandoned building, and all these different characters having to walk in and out around it, and like we get betrayal and violence and all this different type of stuff. Like, of course, the iconic ear-splitting scene is probably what this film is most known for outside the opening titles, which is also fantastic. Just the film grips you alone from the opening sequence of, the main cast talking around a table in a diner talking about should they tip or not, to the very ending of the film, which I won't spoil, even though it's like been over nearly 30 years since the film came out. It is like an iconic movie. There's so much great action, great acting, great gore, great dialogue, great production design, great directing. It's a film that's able to hold you by the balls and not let go until the credits started rolling. It is an impeccable movie. I love this movie. It just is so inspiring as an upcoming filmmaker, showing how little money he had, how little resources he had, but he got the right people together and just made a masterpiece of a film. I absolutely love Reservoir Dogs, and it's by far the best debut I've seen from a director in any filmmaking career.
Number 4.
You mean, let me understand this, because maybe it's me, I'm a little up, maybe. But I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you? I make you laugh? I'm here to fucking amuse you? What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny?
Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas is one of the best gangster films ever made, and it's personally my favorite of all time. I think it is just a amazing piece of cinema that is still timeless nearly all these decades later. It is a masterwork of Scorsese and his writing team, and everyone involved in the production in this film, from the production design, making this feel like a period piece, this gangster aesthetic really going through that this guy's always been known for. But as someone who's not a huge fan of gangster movies, he's just a top notch. He's the cream of the crop when it comes to this type of stuff in this genre flick, and he's just amazing at being able to craft a story with all these complex characters. They're all rich, they're all unique, they're all complex, they are all interesting, and you all love being around them. The acting is across the board amazing. Joe Pesci gives his best performance, and the fact that this came out the same year as Home Alone is just a test to how great of an actor he truly is. Robert De Niro, of course, common collaborator with Scorsese, he's great as always. You get Ray Liotta in an early role in here. Just so many great iconic actors in this movie. You get some of the best scenes in cinema in my opinion, especially when you get Joe Pesci in that garage door sequence, which is amazing, or when he's like talking about, complaining about, I'm funny how? I'm funny how? Like I'm a clown, but make you laugh? It's just so many great dialogue sequences in this film, great soundtrack, great pace for being a 2.5-hour movie, so investing, so enthralling, being this epic story over the course of years and decades about betrayal and rising and falling of this industry and the mob and the mafia and all this trust, and just so meticulously put together by Scorsese. He is just such a masterful filmmaker that although, yes, I think he is a little overrated in some aspects, but for this film, I think he's just perfect. It is an amazing work. I love this movie, and as someone who's not a huge fan of the gangster genre, I think this is the best gangster film ever made. It is an amazing piece of art.
Number 3.
Okay. Sorry.
Paul Thomas Anderson's Punch Drunk Love is a film that I don't really know how to explain why I love it so much. It's a film that on the surface I really wouldn't like that much for being a really quirky, artsy, methodical type piece where it's very much unlike Paul Thomas Anderson's rest of his filmography. He's usually known for doing these epic 2.5-hour biopics that are like spanning across decades and telling this epic tale of betrayal and espionage and thrilling and just, stuff that this guy's known for. And this is just like this little quirky, odd story about this guy just trying to fall in love and him also being caught with a hot sex line run by Philip Seymour Hoffman and just all these little quirks in his life over the course of a couple days. And it's only an hour and a half long. Like, it's so unlike the rest of his career, but it's brilliant. I don't know what to say about this film. It just connects with me. There's something about this film that I just cannot stop loving. First off, I will say Adam Sandler as Barry Egan, by far his best performance of his career. We're just saying a lot because I think in the dramatic world, he's amazing. I mean, we just saw Uncut Gems with Howard Ratner and how he did that character justice, and same thing with Reign Over Me and the Meyerowitz stories. This guy's done a lot of great dramatic work, and I hope he does more in the future beyond the Netflix comedy shtick that he's been doing for the past decade or whatever. But I love him as just this complex character that you really don't know who to side with. He's a very nice on the surface, very timid, very shy, but then in a split second, he can just turn crazy. Like the sequence like when he's in the bathroom on the day with Emily Watson, which their chemistry is amazing in the film as well. Or when they're like early on in the film where he's at his sister's place and he just freaks out and just starts smashing the windows. It's just so unexpected and just so raw from his character that it all feels unique and all feels emotional. It doesn't feel like acting at that point. I think that the score by John Bryan is amazing. One of my favorite film scores of all time. I love the aesthetic he brings to it. I love the score and the different instrumentals he uses. I just think it perfectly fits the odd nature of the film. Anderson's directing and the writing, I think, is also brilliant. I think that the way the film's structured, the way the film constantly keeps you on the edge of your seat of what's going to happen next. I think the acting across the board is fantastic. I talked about Adam Sandler, Emily Watson, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Man, he was a phenomenal actor, and may he rest in peace, but he was so good in this movie. So many great dialogue scenes in this film as well. And that's that and Magic Man. Just so much great dialogue stuff in this movie. I love the aesthetic. I love the cinematography shot in this film and how it just reflects so much of the lighting and especially when they go to Hawaii and it reflects that that late summer atmosphere that I truly love as well. The way the film is just so fast paced but allowing the film to breathe and being so simple focused but at the same time just having a lot more to say and mere discussion after the credits have rolled and just being such an odd movie. It is so just its own thing that I can't help but love it. I rewatch it every single year. I personally think it's Adam Sandler's best work. I think it's Paul Thomas Anderson's best work, which I don't know if that's controversial or not, but I love this movie, no pun intended. Actually, yes, pun intended. I think I already made that joke before, but screw it, who cares? Just great stuff all around. I love this movie, and it is just... It's an impressive piece of art. I love this film.
Number 2.
You okay?
Nah, man. I'm pretty fucking far from okay.
Pulp Fiction. Quentin Tarantino's magnum opus. I adore this movie, as well as many film fans do. This is a bona fide classic in every sense of the word, and there's many reasons for it. This isn't a masterful piece of a screenplay by Tarantino himself, the way he's able to structure all these mess of a character, all these different characters coming together, which should have been an absolute dumpster fire in as in terms of how you're able to structure that, kind of like Infinity War, where I talked about earlier. But the way that Tarantino was able to balance out every single character and each give them their own story, and similar to what Reservoir Dogs did, telling it out of order, making the stories more interesting than if they were told chronologically. Giving the film surprises, like especially the scene with Vincent Vega and Bruce Willis, which is of course iconic. I think that the film is also just very well paced, very exciting, very sad when it needs to be, very exciting when it needs to be, very funny. The Ezekiel 2517 speech will go down as one of the best sequences of any film for the rest of the time. It is just so phenomenally acted by all the different parties: John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, Uma Thurman, Bruce Willis, Ving Rhames, Tim Roth, Christopher Walken, just so many amazing actors in this film that all do their best job in their careers, in my opinion, some at least. And really what made a lot of these actors big debut, I mean, John Travolta came back from the dead from his career after this movie. Same thing with Samuel L. Jackson. I mean, he was basically a nobody before this movie, and he just really rise to fame. And this film definitely shows why his acting talent really skyrocketed after this movie, because he's just such a phenomenal actor. All the different segments that begin this film are all entertaining, all, you know, just so vibrant and just so entertaining and just so I can't even think of the adjectives to describe this movie. It's just so bombastic in the way it's presented. Just a fantastic score, fantastic direction, fantastic editing as well. Great pace, great structure, great acting, great directing. All the different segments we get in this film are all unique and all fun, and all just it's just so much fun. It proves that cinema is still alive. It proves that cinema can be whatever you want it to be. I don't know. I truly adore this movie. No film will be like Pulp Fiction ever for the rest of the time. It is an impeccable movie.
Number 1.
Cool cat likes to rock and roll. Cool cat likes to love and sing.
Happy trails, Hans.
Die Hard is my favorite film of all time. I absolutely love this movie. It may not be the best for many people, but personally for me, it gets closest to what I love about film. It really captures everything that I love about a movie, in my opinion. The action scenes in this film I think are great. Granted, yes, they're not the best choreography in the world, but I personally love them. I love the acting, especially Bruce Willis, who at the time really hadn't done anything like this. It was the first major role, and his role as John McClane is amazing. And what really, the reason why this film became such a templated idea and structure for so many action films I talked about with Speed after this film came out is because John McClane is not an action hero. John McClane is not this buff, huge, larger-than-life guy like Schwarzenegger and Stallone before him that would just like wipe out all these terrorists in 1 second. John McClane, what makes him so damn interesting is that he's just a regular guy. He's just a regular cop in his mid to late 30s that's struggling with his marriage, with his wife, struggling with his kid. He's not in the best shape right now, and then this situation comes in, wrong place, wrong time, and it's just so satisfying seeing this guy come from just being just like this regular schlub to becoming an actual action hero. It is so satisfying to see him, and he's just so charismatic and has so many great one-liners, and is able to be bouncing off chemistry with Alan Rickman so well. May he rest in peace as Hans Gruber, my favorite movie villain of all time. He is so charismatic, he is so threatening, he is so entertaining to see on screen that you just love to be with him every single second. And even his lackeys, every single one of his lackeys are just so unique, and they're so filled with personality that they are way more than the generic stuff we get from any other action movie nowadays. I think the score is great. I think the film is a Christmas movie. I think that the whole message about a man trying to get home to his family for Christmas and all the different iconic stuff like, I have a machine gun, ho, 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 and all the different tracks they use in this film that are related to Christmas. I don't understand why people don't say it's not a Christmas film. I think it's very much rooted in that. And although you can watch this film any moment of the year, it definitely feels like a summer film and a Christmas movie, but still, I watch this every single Christmas because it's a brilliant movie. I think the action is fantastic. The film is definitely well structured in the way that's able to, forward these characters in this situation and iron it out and make it feel halfway. It's not just like this quick 90-minute film where it's like get in, get out. You feel the situation, you feel like you're with the characters for a long time. And what also grounds the film for me is the relationship between John McClane and Officer Powell. Reginald VelJohnson, I really loved in this movie, and it sucks the fact that for the rest of the franchise, he really wasn't utilized. He had a cameo in Die Hard 2, but nothing more. But it sucks because his chemistry with John McClane is just so well done. It's basically the heartbeat of the movie, in my opinion. Especially like when he gets scenes whenever like John John McClane is like stuck in the bathroom after he's like dragging his feet because they got caught by glass because Hans Gruber and one of his lackeys shot all the glass because they realized he was barefoot. And he's just talking to Powell on the phone, and Powell's just talking about how the fact he like shot a kid accidentally when he saw a toy gun and thought it was a real gun, and just stuff like that. You just don't get in much action movies, both before this film and after this film. It is just so emotional at times and just makes you care about everything about this world and these characters. I think that I already talked about the action, but I love the score, I love the characters. I think the action's phenomenal across the entire board. You care about every single person in this situation, both from the good and the bad side. The film's incredibly entertaining, it is incredibly emotionally investing, it is well shot, well directed by John McTiernan, and the way that it's just so round in the structure and the characters and the development. It's just everything about this film is what I love about movies. It is why I like to go to the cinema. It's why I like to make videos for this channel about movies. It gives me hope that I can make a film one day that's as good as Die Hard. This is an amazing action film, and just an amazing film in general, no matter what you classify it as. A Christmas film, not Christmas film, action movie, drama movie, it doesn't matter what it is an amazing movie that kicked off an amazing franchise as well. And I sincerely hope that we get at least one more Die Hard film with Bruce Willis before he passes away, because granted, he's not a great actor nowadays, which sucks because I think he has the acting chops, he just doesn't care anymore. But I don't want A Good Day to Die Hard to be the last Die Hard films he does in this franchise, because we need something at least on the level of a Die Hard 2, come on. But beyond the franchise, I think this is an amazing film that is no question why it influenced so many action films going forward. And even to this day, it's one of the most classically quoted and referenced action films of all time for a reason. It is a bona fide classic. It is an amazing film in all cycles. I think that it does what it does well in spades, and does so much more than what would have been handed in the hands of a lesser director and a lesser script. It is just an amazing movie that does exactly what it needs to do and so much more. I love Die Hard, and it is my favorite film of all time. Well, that was certainly a list, but if you made it to the end of the video, congratulations. I sincerely hope that you had a good time, and I truly appreciate you for sticking around and being a true fan of the channel. And I hope you were able to stand me for at least an hour or two, but regardless, I sincerely hope that you had a good time. And anyways, I think it's time to log off at this point because I'm going to drive myself crazy if I talk any longer. But regardless, please like, comment your ranking, share, and subscribe for more content. I'm CBMF Productions, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.